Chapter 165. Chi-yu smiled and said, "It turns out to be a charity. I must support it." He was born in an orphanage, so he absolutely supported this kind of charity. If it weren't for the orphanage run by the country, he would have been. Thinking of this, Chi-yu couldn't help but think of his parents he saw in the illusion of Xuanyuan's soul, and he couldn't help feeling a little depressed. Ryue was very sensitive, especially Chi-yu, who occupied a very important position in her heart. Naturally, she noticed the change in Chi-yu's face. She couldn't help asking, "What's wrong? You seem to be a little unhappy." Chi-yu forced a smile and shook his head, saying, "It's nothing. But when I go back, I want to ask you for a favor." He was very clear that everything he saw in the illusion of Xuanyuan's soul was what he saw when he was a child, but the memory in his mind was transferred by Xuanyuan's soul with a special ability. Although it was of no practical significance, it let him know he was not abandoned by his parents, and he also knew that his father was also an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur with the surname Chi was relatively much smaller. Since there was a clue, how could he not want to find it? "Chi-yu, you may have to dance after the auction. Can you?" Ryue asked with a smile. Chi-yu said with a wry smile, "Do you think I can?" Ryue frowned and said, "Do you want it or not?" Chi-yu righteously replied, "Yes, of course I do. I'll dance with you alone. I'm your man after all." At this time, the president of the All China Women's Federation on the stage spoke again. "First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming to today's banquet. I don't represent myself, nor the All China Women's Federation, but on behalf of those suffering women and children. As we all know," the president of the All China Women's Federation said with great emotion. The audience was very quiet at this time. Everyone's eyes were completely fixed on her, and they unconsciously put down the wine glasses in their hands. "I won't say much else. Those who are here today are all the cream of the crop of our Yan Huang Republic's women. I hope that everyone can lend a helping hand and help those sisters and children. Here, on behalf of them, I would like to express our sincerest gratitude." Thunderous applause resounded throughout the entire banquet. Although some people had disapproving looks in their eyes, most of them were women. Their eyes were filled with sincerity and eagerness. As she spoke, the president of the Women's Federation stepped aside, and an MC came up. Although he looked ordinary, he gave people a refreshing feeling. "Thank you, President Lee of our Women's Federation, for your speech. President Lee has put in a lot of effort for today's banquet. Here, I would like to express my gratitude to President Lee and all the guests present." The MC took a step back and solemnly bowed to the audience. With a faint smile, Chi-yu's eyes shone with a faint light. He asked Ryue in a low voice, "How much are you going to donate?" Ryue said, "Probably to the left of 10 million. It's hard to say. The donation process of this banquet isn't simple. It's in the form of an auction. When the time comes, we can just pick a few of the more expensive items." "Auction?" Hearing these two words, Chi-yu couldn't help but feel curious. This was his first time attending an auction. Although it wasn't very formal, at least it was considered a simple auction. The MC on the stage said, "Our staff will give each woman a number. Today's charity auction party for the Women's and Children's Foundation will begin immediately." As he spoke, a staff member had already begun to distribute the number plates. At the same time, a cart was pushed up from the back of the podium. The cart was covered with a red velvet cloth. Obviously, it was carrying today's auction item, at least one of them. Ryue's number plate was 62. She pulled Chi-yu to an inconspicuous place, picked up a drink and handed it over. "Chi-yu, you seem to be very interested in this auction." Chi-yu nodded and said, "Ryue, can I ask you for a favor?" Ryue smiled and said, "Do we still need to ask for a favor between us? I'm even yours now. Say it, as long as I can do it." Chi-yu lowered his head. After thinking for a while, he said, "I want you to donate more money. Can you?" Even if I borrow it from you, I think I can pay it back within a year at most. Ryue seemed to know Chiyu for the first time. She looked at him in surprise and said, I didn't expect you to be so kind. Chiyu said indifferently, Have you forgotten my background? I was originally an orphan. If it weren't for those rescue organizations, I'm afraid I wouldn't be who I am now. Today is a good opportunity. I want to take this opportunity to express some of my respect for the country and do my part for those who are still suffering. Ryue smiled and said, Of course I support you in doing good deeds. Our Longyu group has some money, so it's no problem. I will donate it in your name. Chiyu shook his head and said, No, just in the name of Longyu group. Although I also have a card from Ming Ming's father. I can withdraw a certain amount of cash every day, but I don't want to use the country's money for this matter. I really will pay you back. I'm not kidding. Ryue looked at his serious expression and couldn't help but be a little surprised. No need. I said that I'm yours. Why would I care about this money? Chiyu said, No, it's not about money. I'm a man. I can't spend your money all the time. Don't worry, I have a very good plan. If it goes well, perhaps in the near future, I will be able to find you. If it goes well, maybe I can become a rich man soon. I'll tell you when I go back. Ryue looked at Chiyu and said, You seem to have changed a little after coming back this time. You don't seem to be as ruffian as before. You seem to have grown a lot. Chiyu thought that if a person had experienced many times on the edge of life and death, he would have grown up. Although he thought so in his heart, he said, So you like me now? Or do you like me before? Ryue smiled slightly. She looked at him with her head tilted and said, What do you think? Chiyu moved his eyebrows and said with a smile, Of course I like both. Ryue said, The auction is about to start. How much money are you going to let me spend? Our future rich man. Chiyu's eyes flashed. He said, I want you to buy all the auction items today. How much do you think it will cost? Ryue was shocked. She obviously didn't expect Chiyu to be so determined. Although she felt that he was a little impulsive, how could she have the heart to refuse his first request when her lover finally came back? She nodded and said, No matter what, I will support you. I have inquired about it before. I estimate that the total value of today's auction items is about 20 million yuan. But you know, this is a charity auction. I estimate that the auction items worth 20 million yuan will need about 100 million yuan to be auctioned. 100 million yuan? So much? Chiyu looked at Ryue in surprise. Ryue nodded and said, That's right. And this is my conservative estimate. Chiyu thought for a moment and said, Okay. Can you lend me 200 million yuan? Ryue was shocked. She secretly calculated the current cash flow of Longyu Group. After hesitating for a moment, she said, Yes. Then I will lend you 200 million yuan. Chiyu smiled and said, My dear wife, don't worry. I won't let your money go to waste. I said that I will definitely return it to you within a year. I heard that borrowing money requires a mortgage. I think it's better to mortgage me to you. You can use it day or night, 24 hours a day. It's a good price. But Ryue secretly blushed and said, You rascal! You even sold yourself? Although she said so, she secretly thought, Chiyu, you fool. In my heart, how can your value be compared to 200 million yuan? Chiyu smiled and said, It's different when you have money. I feel a lot more confident now. At this moment, the auction was ready to begin. The MC on the stage first greeted the guests below and said with a smile, Today's auction officially begins. I hope that all the female business elites present can contribute to our charity. Wait a minute. When the MC was about to introduce the first auction item of the day, a voice suddenly interrupted her. All the guests focused their attention in the direction where the voice came from. They saw an ordinary-looking but very tall man slowly walking towards the rostrum. Although he did not look handsome as he slowly walked forward, he exuded an invisible noble aura, which made it impossible for anyone to underestimate this man who suddenly appeared. It should be known that women were the protagonists of today's auction. The sudden appearance of such a man interrupted the auction, immediately made the guests present feel surprised and a little dissatisfied. The MC frowned slightly, but her professionalism made her immediately return to normal. She smiled and said, "Sir, what can I do for you?" The person who suddenly stopped the auction was Chiyu. At this time, Chiyu had already walked to the rostrum. He smiled and said, "Yes, I naturally have something to do. I want to ask, before the auction begins, can I donate an auction item to the auction?" Hearing this, a sweet smile suddenly appeared on the MC's face and she said, "Of course, thank you very much for your generosity, sir. May I know what you want to donate to the organizing committee?" Chiyu took out something from his arms and slowly handed it to the MC. The MC reached out and saw that it was a small box carved with wood, which looked like a jewelry box. The carving was very exquisite. Although it was only made of wood, there were patterns of the sun, moon, and stars on the small box. In the center of the front of the box, there was a Kirin who had been stepping on auspicious clouds. It looked very exquisite. What made the MC feel even more strange was that the box gave her a very strange feeling. She actually could not recognize what wood the box was made of. Although she was just an MC, in order to make the charity auction held by the All China Women's Federation more professional, the MC invited was a very famous auctioneer in the auction industry. She had a very unique vision, but she still could not recognize what wood the box was made of. Chiyu smiled and said, "I want to donate a jade ring. I wonder if I can mark it with a base price? Then, this ring will belong to today's auction." The MC looked at the president of the All China Women's Federation, who was sitting on the rostrum next to him. The president nodded slightly and said, "Sir, thank you very much for your support for our charity banquet. Please mark the base price. If the ring is not sold, we will return it to you." Chiyu smiled lightly and said, "I can guarantee that it will not be sold. As for the base price, mark it at 50 million yuan." As soon as he said that, the guests below immediately made a sound of surprise. What kind of ring could be worth 50 million yuan? If it was a super big diamond ring, although this wooden box was exquisite, it was too shabby. The MC looked at Chiyu in surprise and said, "Sir, are you sure you didn't say anything wrong?" Chiyu nodded solemnly and said, "Of course I didn't say anything wrong. It is 50 million, not 5,000 yuan, and it is in RMB. The MC said doubtfully, "Sir, it seems that I have not heard of any ring that can reach such a high price. Looking at your box, even if it is a diamond ring, it will not be too big. If it is the most precious pink diamond, it will not be worth this price. Can I open it and have a look?" Chiyu shook his head and said, "No need. You can open the box when it is auctioned. I can only promise you that it will not be auctioned." The doubt in the MC's eyes deepened. Not only her, but many of the guests present also believed that Chiyu was here to cause trouble. If not for her and Hai Ryua's presence, there would have been people who would have objected. Chiyu ignored the MC and turned back to his previous position. He took Hai Ryua's little hand, and the smile on his face was a little more mysterious. After consulting the chairman of the Women's Federation, the MC finally accepted Chiyu's donation. According to the rules of the auction, the higher the base price of the auction item, the lower it would be. The base price that Chiyu had bid was obviously the highest among all the auction items. Well, our auction will now officially begin. First of all, the collection we are going to auction is a gift from the President of France to the President of our country. It has a beautiful name called Black Pearl. The MC showed his professionalism. He first made a high-profile speech, and the mysterious light in his eyes swept to the guests below, arousing everyone's curiosity. Don't get me wrong. The black pearl I mentioned is not a real pearl. Perhaps you have heard of its name. Louis XIII is the oldest brand of brandy with a very long history, and Louis XIII Black Pearl is the most classic and the most luxurious cognac of Louis XIII. It is brewed from 1,200 kinds of water of life originating from the Champagne region of France for 40 to 100 years. Its value is not only for tasting but also for collecting. There are only 768 bottles in the world, and the bottle we are going to auction today is the first of them. It has a very clear label. Whether from the value of the gift from the President of France or from the bottle itself, it is the most precious collection of wine. Even the bottle is made of artificial crystal, and it is carved with high-purity silver flowers. As the first auction item today, its base price is 300,000 yuan, and each increase is 10,000 yuan. Everyone knew that the first item in an auction was only used to lead the way. However, this bottle of Louis XIII Black Pearls had immediately piqued Qi Yu's interest. One must know that he was very fond of wine, but he had never heard of any wine being sold at such a price. 350,000 yuan. As soon as the base price was announced, someone immediately made a bid. The person who made the bid was the woman with the surname Wang from the Heng Yuan group, who was holding the number 44 and had been fooled by Qi Yu. Ru Yu whispered in Qi Yu's ear, "The value of this bottle of wine is mainly reflected in its number. 7, 8, 8 and 68 bottles of Louis XIII Black Pearls. In China, the price is around 60 to 70,000 a bottle. Coupled with those gimmicks, this is the base price." Qi Yu nodded. He had already made up his mind to spend money, so he naturally did not care about the value of the auction item. He immediately raised the number plate in his hand and said, "Longyu Group, 400,000 yuan." Director Wang obviously wanted to regain her face at the auction. Without waiting for the others to make a bid, she immediately retorted, 500,000 yuan, Heng Yuan Group. Qi Yu snorted coldly. He looked at the director Wang provocatively and said indifferently, Longyu Group, 1 million yuan. His words caused an uproar in the audience. A bottle of wine for 1 million yuan was really too much. However, when they saw Hai Ryue beside Qi Yu, they could more or less understand. After all, Hai Ryue's Longyu Group often contributed to charity. However, Qi Yu's bid caused one person to be unhappy. It was Ryue's brother, Zhang Junshao. He looked at Qi Yu with a frown and walked over discreetly. The woman with the surname Wang was obviously angered. 1,200,000 yuan, Heng Yuan Group. Qi Yu looked at her and smiled. He handed the number plate to Ryue and said, Heng Yuan Group is indeed a pioneer in charity. I really admire your courage and your kindness in contributing to charity. I'll let you have this bottle of wine. He was not a fool. Although he had previously said that he would buy all the auction items, no matter who he sold them to, as long as the price was high enough, it would still be a contribution to charity. At that moment, Zhang Junshao walked over to Ryue. When he heard that Qi Yu had backed out, he was stunned for a moment. Then, he couldn't help but look at the woman with the surname Wang from Heng Yuan Group with a pitiful gaze. The woman with the surname Wang was not a fool. She had been so angry at Qi Yu that she almost vomited blood. That was why she had acted so impulsively. However, it was too late for regrets now. The wine had been raised to a high price of 1,200,000 yuan. Even if she wanted to back out now, it was too late. With such a high price, naturally no one would compete with her. The first auction item naturally fell into the hands of Director Wang. Although the auction was a success, she looked at Qi Yu and Ryue with even more hatred. Although she hid it well, how could Qi Yu, who had extraordinary mental strength, not sense it? But did he care? The answer was no. The first auction item was sold at a high price. Immediately, the chairman of the National Women's Federation on the stage showed a relieved smile. With such a high profile at the beginning, the rest of the auction would not be calm. With a slight smile, Qi Yu's eyes revealed the light of victory. He took the number plate from Hai Ryue's hand again. Zhang Junshao asked Ryue in a low voice, "Is he crazy? What if Director Wang didn't take the bait just now? Ryue glanced at her own items and said naturally, then we'll buy it. I'm not the one who bought it, it's him. He's just buying it in the name of Long Yu Group. He's paying for it. Brother, you don't have to worry. Hearing Ryue's words, Zhang Junshao suddenly relaxed. After all, although Long Yu Group was rich, it did not come from nowhere. Hearing that his beloved woman was giving him face, Qi Yu couldn't help but smile at her gratefully. If it weren't for the fact that they were in public, he would have rushed up and kissed Ryue. Very quickly, the second auction item began. This time, Qi Yu was not in a hurry to make a bid. The auction item was an ancient inkstone, which was obviously very valuable. The starting price was 1 million, and the bidding process was not as exciting as before. As the crowd slowly raised the price of the inkstone was raised to 1,200,000 in a short while. Mr. Wang seemed to be hurt by his impulsiveness and, like Qi Yu, was not in a hurry to make a bid. 5 million. Qi Yu finally opened his mouth. As soon as he opened his mouth, he immediately raised the price by a quarter. At this time, all the guests looked at Qi Yu with a strange look in their eyes. Qi Yu knew very well what those gazes meant. These people obviously regarded him as a troublemaker. As soon as he opened his mouth, the entire hall suddenly became silent. As Qi Yu made his bid, his eyes fell on Director Wang with a faint smile. The light in his eyes was obviously filled with provocation. It was as if he was saying, "Continue if you have the guts." The actual price of the ancient inkstone was actually only about 1.2 million. After increasing the price to 1.5 million, it had far exceeded this value. Ms. Wang from Heng Yuan Group did not act impulsively this time. She coldly glared at Qi Yu and did not say a word. "Is there anyone who wants to continue bidding?" the MC asked with a hint of joy. After all, her commission was related to the total price of the auction. Based on the current situation, the total price of today's auction would obviously not be low. Everyone present was an elite in the business world. Although they were all women, to be able to attend this banquet, they all had outstanding intelligence. In the face of an unreasonable price, even if it was for charity, they would not be as impulsive as the woman surnamed Wang. 1.5 million going once. 1.5 million going twice. 1.5 million going thrice. Deal. Without any suspense, Qi Yu obtained the second item. After a simple registration, the auction continued. Naturally, the female elites present could see that Qi Yu was provoking Ms. Wang. They were happy to let them have the battlefield. After all, it was always a good thing for them that someone was fighting to donate to charity. After all, not everyone was like Qi Yu, who wanted to contribute to charity. As the auction continued, Qi Yu had already become the focal point of the entire venue when the fifth item was decided. Apart from the first item, the other 4 items had all been successfully auctioned off by him. Furthermore, the winning bid had far exceeded the starting bid. Often, when others had made similar bids, Qi Yu would suddenly raise a bid that exceeded the starting bid by more than 20%. In this manner, it was naturally very difficult for anyone to compete with him. Although Ms. Wang also wanted to compete with Qi Yu, she was afraid that she would be fooled by Qi Yu again and pay an unnecessary price. She could only watch helplessly as Qi Yu collected the auction items one by one. After all, under the absolute suppression of money, she could only tell herself to calm down and wait for the next opportunity. Qi Yu stood beside Ryue the whole time. He held the auction card in one hand and held Ryue's soft and slender hand in the other. He had an accurate estimate of his current funds. So far, the 4 auction items had cost him about 6 million yuan, and the price of the following items would only get higher and higher. The way Zhang Junshao looked at Qi Yu became a little strange. He had been thinking in his heart, where did Qi Yu get so much money? One had to know that within 3 days after the end of the auction, all the auctioned items had to be paid for with the corresponding amount. Based on his understanding of Chi-Yu, although this young man was a little mysterious, no matter how he looked at him, he did not look like a person with so much money. Chi-Yu's auction was held in the name of the Longyu Group, which meant that everything he auctioned was recorded in the name of the Longyu Group. If he suddenly disappeared or had no money to pay, the Longyu Group would be in trouble. As the vice president of the Longyu Group and one of the direct heirs, Zhang Junshao inevitably felt a little worried. Although he wanted to ask his sister again, when he saw the way Ryue looked at Chi-Yu, he could not help but hold back. Growing up with his sister, it was the first time he had seen such a sweet look in her eyes. And all of this was brought by this inconspicuous man in front of him. What charm did he have to attract his arrogant sister? Zhang Junshao was secretly guessing the source of Chi-Yu's funds, but Chi-Yu did not have the slightest intention to stop. The auction continued, and the money he spent was like flowing water. In a short while, when the auction was 2/3 of the way through, Chi-Yu had already spent a total of 20 million yuan. The prices he quoted were very high, so naturally, the total price that Ryue had estimated for the auction items to be auctioned was much higher. This was after he gave up some of his collections to others. Otherwise, it would be more than this number. Chi-Yu was very shrewd. Although he seemed to be very arrogant on the surface, he was very skillful during the auction. When the price of an item had been raised to a very high level, he would give up at the right time, causing those who maliciously raised the price to fall into his trap. The woman surnamed Wang had already been tricked twice. Although the price was not as high as the price of the first bottle of wine, it was still a considerable loss. The resentment in her eyes was already somewhat uncontrollable. Well, in this intense auction, I believe all the distinguished guests must be a little tired. Why don't we take a break for a while? After 30 minutes, the auction will continue. In addition to the special auction items donated by Mr. Chi, the total value of the following auction items will also exceed the total value of the previous auction items. Please wait and see. The MC smiled and temporarily interrupted the auction. At this time, the waiters appeared at the right time and served all kinds of drinks and snacks to replenish the previous consumption. The previously quiet banquet hall became noisy again. Along with the beautiful and slow melody of the music, the female business elites of Genesis Network gathered together according to their own circles. Most of the topics of discussion revolved around the previous auction. Their eyes frequently fell on Chi-Yu, and some speculations about the relationship between Chi-Yu and Ryue were endless. The two of them had completely become the focus of the audience. Chi-Yu was asking Ryue in a low voice about the value of the items he had won when Zhang Junshao's voice suddenly came from beside him. "Mr. Chi, I don't know if I can talk to you alone." Chi-Yu turned his eyes to the tall and handsome man and smiled. "Of course." Ryue frowned slightly and said, "Brother, you." Zhang Junshao interrupted her and said, "Don't worry, I won't steal your sweetheart. I'm just having a casual chat. Mr. Chi, why don't we go to the balcony to get some fresh air? The air there should be better than here." Chapter 166. Chi-Yu followed Zhang Jiuxiao to the side of the banquet hall and went to the balcony outside. Although it was summer, the weather today was not very hot. Moreover, it was night time, so a light breeze blew over. It felt much better than the cold air conditioning in the banquet hall. Taking in a deep breath of the air that was far more turbid than it had been during the era of the ancient beasts, Chi-Yu leaned on the railing and looked outside. From the balcony, he could clearly see the wide streets outside. Gorgeous lights filled the city, rendering the night that was not so quiet. He was back, he was finally back. When Chi-Yu saw Ryue Ming and his group of brothers, his heart was filled with excitement. However, when he really came back, he realized that he actually had a deep nostalgia for the ancient beast. Thinking back to his magical experiences in the past 6 months, his gaze became much gentler. He knew that he was now the true king of warriors who was willing to protect the god of life and death. He could finally be considered to have the power to protect the East. "Mr. Chi, I'm really sorry for calling you out. Compared to Qi Yu's straightforward character, Zhang Jiuxiao's appearance was much more outstanding. He had an elegant temperament and a handsome face. He was obviously the type of man many women would dream of. At least, he could be considered a prince charming. Director Zhang, you don't have to be so polite. You are Ruyue's brother, so just call me by my name. Qiyu replied with a smile. Zhang Jiuxiao smiled indifferently and said, Then I won't stand on ceremony. Qiyu, we have only met a few times, but you have left a very deep impression on me. Of course, this impression is not because of you, but because of the changes that you have brought to Ruyue. Frankly speaking, it is really hard for me to believe that Ruyue has changed so much in just a year. However, I can be sure that the changes that have happened to her are definitely related to you. Can you be more specific, Director Zhang? I don't think Ruyue has changed much. Only her temper has improved a great deal. Zhang Qiuxiao sighed and said, This sister of mine has been very competitive since she was young. He was even more competitive than many boys. Regardless of when he was young. It was after he joined the Dragon Realm group. Everything she had done was outstanding. Otherwise, our parents wouldn't have let her manage the Longyu group. Ruyue was a typical strong woman. Even I, as her brother, can't help but admire her ice-cold temperament and resolute way of doing things. However, since about 5 or 6 years ago, I have been a little worried about her. If nothing else, just the matter of her marriage was a big headache for me and our parents. Ruyue's standards were too high, and she was too arrogant and outstanding. It was really difficult for me to find someone who could match her. As long as she was in the company, she would even forget my identity as her brother and work hard every day. With her continuous efforts, in just a few years, the Longyu group has undergone earth-shaking changes, and the scale of the group has nearly doubled. Although my work was also very busy, Ruyue had to do a lot more than me in the past. There was a time when the company was at its most critical point. She even didn't sleep for 7 days and 7 nights in a row. She persisted through the bottleneck and made the Longyu group reach a new level. Qi Yu's eyes revealed a focused gaze. Hearing about Ruyue from another person, he couldn't help but feel a little strange in his heart. Although he and Ruyue had developed to the most intimate relationship between a man and a woman, after all, they had not known each other for a long time. They were mostly at the level of the guardian warriors. He didn't know much about the Ruyue in the words of the living. Zhang Xinxiao paused for a moment and continued, However, since you appeared a few months ago, I found that my sister suddenly changed. She was always energetic in the past, but she would actually become absent-minded more than once. Sometimes, even in the meeting, she would be absent-minded. She still handled her work well, but from her eyes, I saw many places that were different from before. From then on, she really became like a girl. She also paid attention to dressing up and began to show a gentle smile. Seeing her like this, I was really happy. Qiyu, I must thank you for this. The gaze in Qiyu's eyes suddenly changed. From Zhang Xinxiao's words, he had already heard something. Brother Zhang, you can go straight to the topic. I think the auction is about to start. Zhang Xinxiao's eyes flashed and he said, Do you remember the time when you threatened me? At that time I was really shocked. It was also from then on that I discovered that you were extraordinary. However, Qiyu, what I want to tell you is that I only have one sister. I don't want any harm to come to her. Qiyu nodded his head and replied, This is human nature. If I had a younger sister, I would definitely think the same way. Zhang Xinxiao smiled and said, In that case, I want to know, what is Mr. Qi's occupation? From what you have just done at the auction, I am afraid that your assets are not much less than our Longyu group. If you become my brother-in-law in the future, I really want to know something about you. I don't know if you can satisfy my curiosity. Looking at Zhang Xinxiao, Qiyu suddenly felt uncomfortable. It was not because of Zhang Xinxiao but because of himself. Yes. As a brother, if he suddenly saw his sister being so intimate with a man she didn't know, he would probably be suspicious. Indeed, apart from his identity as a guardian warrior, he was not worthy of Ryue in any way. The money used for the auction just now was borrowed from Ryue by him. Perhaps Ryue wouldn't feel anything, but as her relatives, or as the shareholders of the Longyu Group, what would they think? He was indeed too impulsive. Although thinking so in his heart, Chi-yu did not regret what he did today. Brother Zhang, I think, with the strength of the Longyu Group, it is really easy for them to investigate such a small figure like me. My background is also very simple, and there is nothing to hide. I am an orphan. I grew up in an orphanage. When I was 14 years old, before I graduated from junior high school, I walked into society for various reasons. You can think of me as a gangster. I lived like this until last winter. Later, I met Ryue. With the help of Ryue, I entered Qingbei University to study. However, I dropped out of school for some reasons. I have no money, and I don't have any job. Now I am simply an unemployed person. I know you are guessing where my money came from. Yes, you guessed right. The expenses needed for the auction were all lent to me by Ryue. After listening to Chi-yu's unreserved confession, Zhang Xinxiao was stunned. Although he also guessed that Chi-yu did not have much ability, he did not expect him to be like this. An orphan, a semi-illiterate who hadn't graduated from junior high school, a ruffian, and an unemployed person. All of these all reflected the identity of Chi-yu at the bottom of society. Whether compared with him or Ryue, there was too much difference. Mr. Chi, I hope you understand that I am not joking with you. Can you be a little more serious? Subconsciously, Zhang Xinxiao still felt that Chi-yu was not ordinary. Therefore, he found it hard to believe everything Chi-yu said. Chi-yu smiled indifferently and said, Brother Zhang, I said that there is nothing to hide about my identity. You can easily find out all my information. I can only tell you that everything I said is the truth. As for whether you believe it or not, that is your problem. As you said, the money you used at the auction was all from the Longyu Group. You just said that you borrowed it from Ryue. I want to know why? Zhang Xinxiao felt that something was wrong. Chi-yu was not joking. His expression was very serious, and his eyes looking at him were very clear. Chi-yu sighed softly. I am an orphan. If there was no rescue organization established by the country, perhaps I would not exist in this world. Therefore, I hope to contribute to the country. I just want to support the country's charity. As for why I did it, I can't explain it now. Zhang Xinxiao's voice rose a little, and his face became a lot colder. So, everything you did before was just to offer Buddha with borrowed flowers? Chi-yu said indifferently, If you want to understand it that way, there is nothing wrong with it. Zhang Xinxiao said slightly angrily, But, do you know that everything you did just now has caused great damage to our Longyu Group? Not only the money you spent, but also the limelight at the auction. You have made our Longyu Group different in the eyes of these female entrepreneurs. You snatched the auction items from everyone's hands without any scruples, and you even offered an unreasonable high price. What will others think of you? What's more, you spent 20 million yuan, not 2,000 yuan. Do you know how difficult it is to earn 20 million yuan? Do you know how many days and nights Ryue has to work hard to do that? Looking at Zhang Xinxiao deeply, Chi-yu's somewhat strange eyes suddenly became a lot more determined. I said that I borrowed the money from Ryue. Since I borrowed it, I will definitely return it, and I will bring enough interest to Longyu Group. Perhaps, from a business point of view, this is very unreasonable. But, I hope that Brother Zhang can give me a chance like Ryue. Zhang Xinxiao frowned and said, Give you a chance? Then, tell me, what will you use to repay this debt? Chi-yu said, I can't say for now, but I can guarantee that within a year, the 200 million yuan I borrowed from Ryue will be returned to Longyu Group with interest. Zhang Xinxiao said in surprise, What? You borrowed 200 million yuan from Ryue? Chi Yu smiled indifferently and said, "Yes, 200 million yuan. For a ruffian like me, it is definitely an astronomical figure of 200 million yuan." At this time, Zhang Xinxiao could not calm down at all. The anger that he had been suppressing finally burst out. However, just as he was about to get angry, Chi Yu suddenly stepped forward and came to his side. Before he could react, Chi Yu's hand had already pressed on his shoulder. Zhang Xinxiao only felt that his body suddenly became numb, and he couldn't even make a sound. Looking at Chi Yu, his angry eyes couldn't help but be a little shocked. It was just a simple physical contact, and it was even with the clothes between them. With his knowledge, he couldn't understand what was going on at all. "I'm sorry, Brother Zhang. I know that what I did today is very difficult for you to accept. I also understand that as a man, if you want to be recognized by others, you have to be successful. I just hope that you can give me this opportunity. Just wait and see, within a year, I will definitely give you a satisfactory answer. Just now, you asked me why I borrowed 200 million yuan. I've already thought it through. If I don't fulfill my promise within a year, then I will only have one compensation, and that is my life." Chi Yu's tone was extremely firm. Looking into his eyes, Zhang Xinxiao suddenly felt his brain sink into a daze. That seemingly solid gaze seemed to directly pierce into the deepest part of his heart. A faint divine light flickered, and from Chi Yu's eyes, he saw many things that he had never felt before. In that instant, Chi Yu had already deeply imprinted some memories into his brain through his own spiritual fluctuations, and these memories would gradually appear in Zhang Xinxiao's dreams from now on. After all, this was the brother of his beloved. Chi Yu knew that there were some things that he should let Zhang Xinxiao know. Chi Yu returned to the banquet hall, while Zhang Xinxiao was still standing on the balcony. However, he was now facing the banquet hall, leaning against the balcony door, and his eyes happened to be looking at the position of the rostrum. His body was still completely paralyzed, and he couldn't move at all. But his posture was adjusted by Chi Yu very naturally, and from the outside, there was no flaw. At this time, the auction had already started again. Because of the conversation with Zhang Xinxiao just now, an auction item had already been sold. Chi Yu returned to Ryue's side. Ryue looked at him, and then looked at Zhang Xinxiao on the balcony, and couldn't help but reveal a questioning gaze. Chi Yu smiled slightly and said in a low voice, "Don't worry, your brother just told me to treat you better in the future. He said that the air on the balcony is better, and it's more comfortable than the air conditioning here, so he watched the auction from there." Naturally, Ryue believed Chi Yu's words without a doubt. She had already returned her gaze to the rostrum. Zhang Xinxiao's words were not completely useless to Chi Yu. At this time, he had calmed down from the impulse at the beginning of the auction. Looking at the auction on the stage, Chi Yu didn't bid again. Indeed, in such an auction, if Long Yu Group continued to be high-profile, it would indeed be detrimental to its future development. For Ryue's sake, Chi Yu decided to give up. He quietly watched the remaining auction items being sold one by one, but he didn't bid again. With Chi Yu's giving up halfway, the auction showed a situation where hundreds of people contended. The last one-third of the auction items were indeed much more precious than the first ones. Although Chi Yu didn't participate in the auction, the final price of each auction item was much higher than the starting price because of the enthusiastic atmosphere of the auction before. The woman surnamed Wang won several good auction items in succession, just like when Chi Yu provoked her before. Every time she succeeded, she would cast a complacent look in Chi Yu's direction. The auction items were reduced one by one, and the auction was coming to an end. After getting another auction item, the woman surnamed Wang walked in the direction of Chi Yu and Ryue with some satisfaction. Ryue's expression didn't change, as if she didn't see this person at all. Chi Yu's expression was even calmer. In his eyes, the woman was just a clown. "What? Did he give up halfway? Or are you not firm enough?" The woman surnamed Wang walked to Chi-yu and Ryue and stood beside them. Although her eyes were in the direction of the rostrum, she lowered her voice and provoked Chi-yu viciously. Chi-yu smiled. Would he be afraid of such a vulgar topic? Not firm enough? Have you seen it before? No, of course you haven't. I'm afraid you won't have such a chance in your life. Because, Auntie, you really don't suit my taste. How about I give you a name like the Sun Nation? What should I call you? Let's call you Sagging Milk Bag. What do you think? He was as calm and collected as the woman surnamed Wang. He also lowered his voice, but his words were much more vicious. You! Under Chi-yu's provocation, the woman surnamed Wang couldn't help but raise her voice. It immediately attracted the attention of the people around. There was a hint of light in her eyes. Chi-yu pressed his index finger to his lips. Shu manners, President Wang. You have to pay attention to your manners. The woman surnamed Wang's face had become extremely ugly. If it weren't for the powder on her face to cover it, who knew what the color would have been like? The clear voice of the MC on the rostrum was still the same as at the beginning. Well, that's all for today. Our auction is about to end. We will immediately begin the auction of today's last auction item, which is the special ring donated by Mr. Chi of the Longyu Group. As she spoke, an etiquette lady walked up with a tray in her hand. Under the contrast of the red flannelette on the tray, the exquisite wooden box that Chi-yu had handed to the MC earlier was impressively on the tray. The base price is 50 million. The MC couldn't help but feel a little guilty when he said this number. After all, the prices of all the items sold today were not even this number. The woman surnamed Wang seized the opportunity and said disdainfully, You casually took out a box and said it's worth 50 million? What do you think we are? Even if this is a charity gala, you don't have to deceive everyone like this. Her words still had a certain effect. All kinds of doubtful eyes were focused on the direction of Chi-yu. Chi-yu walked slowly to the rostrum as if he was taking a leisurely stroll. He smiled and said, I also understand that it's hard for all of you to believe that this small ring has such a high value. However, I can tell you that the value of this ring is far above the base price I quoted. Because it's unique. As he spoke, Chi-yu had already stepped onto the rostrum. The distance between the rostrum and the ground was 1 meter. He indeed stepped onto the rostrum. His movements were very elegant and natural, and it didn't make anyone feel abrupt. When someone was surprised by his movements just now, he had already come to the MC's side and took the exquisite wooden box into his hand. Sweeping his gaze across the audience, Chi-yu smiled indifferently and said, Since everyone has doubts, then let me show it in front of everyone. I think you can fully understand everything I'm saying just by looking at it. As he spoke, he held the wooden box in his palm with one hand and slowly opened the exquisite lid of the wooden box with the other. Chi-yu's movements were very slow. At this time, everyone's eyes were completely focused on his palm. After all, everyone wanted to know what kind of treasure this ring that he said was worth 50 million. 50 million. That was already a very large number. The edge of the wooden box opened a gap. Just as everyone was looking forward to it, the MC's body suddenly trembled slightly. Her eyes instantly became a little dull. This was because she could clearly feel a cold current coming from the ring in an instant. That cold feeling couldn't help but make her body tremble a little. A faint layer of white mist that was visible to the naked eye drifted out from the wooden box. Everything that the MC felt was soon clearly felt by the other guests. That cold air brought a refreshing feeling to everyone in this hot summer. As the box gradually opened, the cold air also became more and more intense. The temperature of the entire banquet hall, which was thousands of square meters, was constantly falling under the influence of this faint layer of white mist. The thermometer on the wall had already dropped from 25 degrees Celsius to 20 degrees Celsius. Moreover, it was still falling. Chi-yu's gaze was a little frozen. Looking at the wooden box in his hand, the corners of his mouth revealed a trace of a gentle smile. The change in temperature and the white mist made the attention of all the guests more focused. At this time, the wooden box finally completely opened under the last movement of Chi-Yu's fingers. Suddenly, a white mist was emitted, and the cold air caused the needle of the thermometer to stop at the position of 15 degrees Celsius. In a short period of less than a minute, it could actually reduce the temperature of such a wide space by more than 10 degrees. What was this thing? The white mist gradually dispersed around. As the temperature dropped, it had gradually disappeared. After the white mist, the mysterious veil of the ring in the wooden box was finally lifted and presented in front of everyone. Blue. First of all, everyone saw blue. At this moment, the blue that appeared in front of their eyes. It had been deeply imprinted in the deepest part of their memories. At that time, it was crystal clear that could not be described in words. Pure blue, sparkling with a celestial luster, a faint blue light. Accompanied by the chilly airflow, it brought a strong sense of shock to everyone. Blue was the main body of the ring. It looked very slender and was obviously a lady's ring. Even the purest crystal could not compare to its crystal luster. On the simple blue ring, there was no overly gorgeous pattern. There was also no diamond that women loved the most. It was just a simple plain ring, but it left the deepest impression on everyone. Chi-Yu took the blue ring out of the wooden box. Everyone was surprised to see that the ring actually emitted a faint layer of blue light. Although it was not strong, the light was obviously there. As it left the box, the chilly air flow became even more obvious. The blue ring seemed to be transparent, but there seemed to be a layer of white air flow roaming within the main body of the ring. A light flashed in Chi-Yu's eyes, and the lights in the hall went out at the same time. However, the extinguishment of the lights did not cause panic among the guests. This was because, in the suddenly dark banquet hall, the incomparably cold blue light in Chi-Yu's hand became clearer. It was like a bright moon high up in the sky, held in Chi-Yu's hand. The blue light was clearly visible to everyone. It is not a diamond, but it is a crystal of ice. In this world, I can guarantee that besides me, no one else can take out such a ring. Simply put, it is carved out of jade. It is the soul of the 10,000 years cold jade. Perhaps everyone will doubt my words, but I think the aura it emitted is enough to prove everything. Yes, the material of the ring in Chi-Yu's hand came from the 10,000 years cold jade. After being carved by Xuanyuan's soul, it was only a small part of the soul of the 10,000 years cold jade. Under Chi-Yu's suggestion, Xuanyuan's soul used the sharpness of Xuanyuan's sword to carve it into the shape of a ring in Chi-Yu's body. There were no markings because there was no need for it. The world's most dazzling blue color had already become its most dazzling color, and there was no need for any embellishments. The lights came back on, and the darkness seemed to have been specially prepared for the 10,000 years cold jade ring. All right, I think we can start the auction now. Chi-Yu placed the 10,000 years cold jade ring back into the wooden box. At the moment, apart from the god weapon and the Chilan octatic treasures, this could be considered the most precious treasure he had. It was exactly because of this that he had taken it out as the auction item for this charity auction. Of course, he had his own reasons for doing this. The MC didn't even know when Chi-Yu came down from the podium. Her gaze was completely fixed on the 10,000 years cold jade ring in the wooden box. There was no woman who didn't like jewelry, especially this kind of unique and special jewelry. The MC was the closest to the ring, so she could feel the cold air clearly. If she could bring it along in the summer, it would be like a mobile air conditioner. Just this point alone made its value immeasurable, especially since it was completely natural. 10,000 years cold jade. This term only appeared in novels, but after Chi-Yu's demonstration, the guests present saw the shocking blue color with their own eyes, and they no longer had any doubts. This is incredible, the MC murmured. I've been in the auction industry for close to 10 years, but even overseas I've never seen such an outstanding gem. Oh no, such a unique treasure. Diamonds are precious, but compared to the 10,000 years cold jade, it pales in comparison. As a woman, I really want it for myself. I now completely believe that its starting price of 50 million is worth it, even though it's just a ring. Dear distinguished guests, I think we can start the last auction of the day. Everyone, please bid. Silence. The whole place fell into complete silence. However, the eyes of every woman present, including Ryue, couldn't help but shine like stars. A precious sword matched a chivalrous knight, and such a superb accessory was naturally a woman's favorite. From the moment the 10,000 years cold jade ring appeared, it had completely attracted everyone's attention. The woman surnamed Wang seemed to have forgotten her resentment towards Chiyu. She slowly raised the sign in her hand and solemnly said, "Mr. Chiyu, if I've been rude to you and the Long Yu group, please forgive me. To be able to take out such a precious treasure for charity auction, I think your actions are enough to earn everyone's heartfelt respect, including mine. It's simply too beautiful. I think, as its previous owner, you must have given it a name." Chiyu was slightly stunned, but he quickly returned to normal. The woman surnamed Wang didn't seem so annoying anymore. "Of course, it's unique, so it naturally has its own name. I'll call it the Ancient Heart to prove its age. After more than 10,000 years of accumulation, this 10,000 years cold jade soul essence was formed. It's perfect, at least in my heart." Chapter 167. Although the ring was dazzling, its price was indeed too high. Lady Wang's bid immediately caused an uproar. It should be known that, apart from competing with the Longyu Group in certain industries, Hengyuan Group's main business was jewelry. This could be easily seen from the special diamond necklace around Lady Wang's neck, which was made up of blue diamonds. As a member of the jewelry industry, she had actually stood up to bid without hesitation. It was obvious that this Ancient Heart cold jade soul essence ring was indeed worth that much. Some of the shrewd, strong women immediately reacted after hearing Lady Wang's words. Before the MC could call out 50 million going once, they immediately raised the paddles in their hand. Ryue's eyes were a little hazy as she looked at the ring on the stage. She didn't know why, but her heart was filled with a sense of loss. She felt that it was a great pity that the ring was so precious, but at the same time, she felt lost because of what the ring represented. Under the dumbfounded gaze of the MC, the price continued to rise. In just a short while, the price of the Ancient Heart had already exceeded 65 million renminbi, even though the MC had forgotten to mention the amount of the price increase each time. The name Ancient Heart was an idea that Chiyu had come up with on the spur of the moment. Not only was the 10,000-year-cold jade formed over a long period of time, but it was also to commemorate everything that had happened to him during the era of the ancient beast. Lady Wang's expression became very solemn. Her eyes became very clear and abnormally bright. As someone from a jewelry family, she knew very well that the Ancient Heart on the stage was definitely a priceless treasure. Although it hadn't been specially appraised, the aura emitted by the Ancient Heart was enough for her to understand everything. It was an incomparably sparkling blue color, as well as its ability to change temperature. This was definitely not something that could be created by any special technique. Even if one used dry ice to lower the temperature of such a large space, it would still take time. However, all of this had been completed in just a few blinks of an eye. 70 million. Lady Wang gritted her teeth and called out the price. This was close to the limit that she could bear. The audience gradually quietened down. Although the women present were all elites in the business world, as a business, their cash flow was limited. And they were not rich playboys. Most of them accumulated wealth through their own hard work. 70 million to buy a ring was already somewhat inconceivable for them. After seeing the Ancient Heart, these business elites had gradually calmed down, and the sound of bidding also came to a halt. 71 million. Finally, someone spoke, and the person who spoke turned out to be the beautiful woman Chiyu met when he first entered the banquet, Ryue's future sister-in-law. A trace of disappointment appeared in the eyes of the woman surnamed Wang. She sighed and said, "To be honest, I really hope to obtain this ring. If the conditions allow it, I will definitely offer a higher price. But recently, our Heng Yuan Group has been dealing with some matters regarding the listing of the company, and the company's mid-year financial report is about to be released. Under these circumstances, 70 million is already the limit of what I can afford. It seems that I have no choice but to give up." As she spoke, she lowered her head dejectedly. Just when everyone thought that 71 million was going to be the highest price of the day, a calm voice suddenly sounded, "I bid 80 million. The audience went into an uproar once again, and all eyes turned towards the direction of the voice. The voice had come from the back of the rostrum. It sounded as moving as an aureole leaving the valley. It didn't have any charm, but it made everyone feel very comfortable when they heard it. The clear and melodious voice also had a hint of mellowness to it. The perfect voice caused everyone to gasp in surprise. A graceful figure slowly walked out from the back of the rostrum. It was a woman. To be precise, it should be a woman. She looked to be less than 20 years old. Her long black hair draped over her back. Her hair was very straight and soft, and under the illumination of the banquet hall, it shone with a mysterious luster. Her long, soft, and straight hair extended all the way to the ground, like black satin, giving off an extremely soft feeling. She was around 1.7 meters tall, and her well-proportioned figure couldn't be considered voluptuous, but it was incomparably attractive. At the first sight of her, Chi Yu suddenly felt the same feeling he had when he first saw Ryue and Wen-ting. It was completely close to perfection. Perhaps only the successor of the goddess Athena, Yamu, could barely surpass her in terms of temperament. Incomparably exquisite facial features, tender skin, a pair of large eyes that shone with a gentle light, coupled with her long hair that reached the ground and her slender body, every part of her was so attractive. She was wearing a simple black evening gown, and there was nothing special about it. She was conservative like Ryue, and only a third of her upper arms were exposed. Her snow-white skin was full of a warm jade-like texture. That delicate and alluring feeling was as if water would drip out of it with a gentle pinch. His big black eyes seemed to be able to speak. His gentle gaze swept across everyone present. Slightly nodding, he said, "I am very presumptuous to disturb everyone. Xiao Lu is very sorry. Please forgive me." The eyes of all the men present lit up, and all the women could not help but be overshadowed by her, except for Ryue. Only Ryue's coldness and stunning beauty could be compared with this beauty, who suddenly appeared. Xiao Lu turned to the chairman of the National Women's Federation on the stage, smiled slightly, and apologized. "I'm sorry, Chairman Li, please forgive my presumptuousness. However, this last auction item really forced me to come out from the backstage." Chairman Li stood up and said with a smile, "Xiao Lu, you are also a successful representative of women. It doesn't matter. You should have come to this banquet." After a short moment of amazement, Chi Yu had recovered at this time. He was a little surprised to find that the guests in the banquet hall seemed to be very familiar with the long-haired girl who suddenly appeared. He was not surprised to see the infatuation in the men's eyes, but what surprised him was that even the female entrepreneurs present were looking at Miss Xiao Lu with eyes full of admiration, and there was no jealousy that women should have. "Ryue, who is this Xiao Lu? It seems that everyone knows her." Chi Yu asked Ryue through telepathy. Ryue said in a low voice, "Don't you know? Oh my God! Are you a modern person or not?" Chi Yu smiled faintly and said, "Even I don't know how to explain it. Don't forget that I just came back from the ancient beasts era." Ryue glanced at him and saw that Chi Yu did not focus his attention on the stunning Xiao Lu. She could not help but feel a little happy in her heart. In fact, although Chi Yu liked beautiful women, he had also seen many top-grade beauties. He also had 3 top-grade confidants. Although this Xiao Lu was enough to shock him, it was not to the extent of infatuation. Moreover, before coming back, he had already decided to cultivate his character and not to easily get involved in emotional troubles. Speaking of which, the rise of Xiao Lu is about the same time as when you became the Zodiac Guardian God Warrior. Just last winter, she suddenly appeared on the stage of the entertainment industry like a meteor. In just a short period of 3 months, she actually moved everyone's heart with her moving voice. She became the leader of the new generation of our Yanhuang Republic's music industry. I have heard her songs, it is really like the sound of nature. Qiyu suddenly understood and said, "So she is a big star. No wonder everyone seems to know her. But she has only been in the industry for a little more than a year. How can she have so much money? She can only buy a ring with 80 million yuan." Ryua smiled slightly and said, "Haven't you heard? The power of the masses is great." Ever since her debut, she had only released one album. It was a compilation of 14 singles. Each song had a different characteristic, perfectly displaying her heavenly voice. The sales of this album alone has reached an astonishing 4 million copies, and this is only within our Yanhuang Republic. This album of hers has now entered the global market. It is not difficult for her to take out 80 million yuan. Xiao Lu is a very strange star. She is different from other stars. She never seems to care about money. She sings for the sake of singing. It can be said that she is the dream lover in the hearts of all men, and also the angel in their hearts that they need to protect. I think, as long as it is a man. After hearing her voice, I am afraid that no one will have the intention to hurt her, not even a little bit. Only those who have really heard her voice can understand that feeling. Moreover, although she is beautiful, she does not cause jealousy. That is because she is low-key. With her achievements in the recording industry, she can have greater development. However, she did not. Unlike other stars, she did not change from singing to acting. She did not even do any advertising. She only released that album. All her public performances only appeared in charity events, and she did not charge any fees. Such a singer is completely recognized by us women. The so-called unspoken rules of the entertainment industry are even more isolated from her. Even if countless reporters follow her for 24 hours, they will not be able to dig out any gossip from her. Such a girl, I can only use the word perfect to describe her. I did not expect that she will also come to tonight's party. With her low-key manner, she should be preparing to sing a single after the auction. After listening to Ryua's simple introduction, Qiyu suddenly had a great interest in this gentle and beautiful girl. Is it not for money? Did she enter the entertainment industry just to sing? Did she want to contribute her beautiful voice to everyone? 80 million going once, Ms. Xiao Lu's price. After a short period of surprise, the MC has re-entered his role after getting the signal of the Women's Federation's president. Xiao Lu stood under the stage, smiling and nodding to the people under the stage. When her moonlight shifted to Qiyu, she could not help but stay for a while, just in time to meet Qiyu's eyes. Qiyu was a little surprised to find that this girl named Xiao Lu did not have any jewelry on her body, not even a decorative necklace. Everything was so natural, giving him the feeling of breathing the clear air when he first arrived at the ancient behemoth era. 80 million going twice. The MC has already raised the auction hammer in her hand. If no one else bids, when she calls out for the third time, the ancient heart will be sold. Is there anyone else who wants to make a bid? If there isn't, then the ancient heart cold jade soul ring will belong to Miss Xiao Lu, the master of ceremonies routinely asked. Xiao Lu's gaze had already left Qiyu and landed on the ancient heart. There was no excitement or joy in her eyes, only anticipation. 100 million. The two short words represented an astronomical number. These two simple words were filled with determination. 80 million going thrice. 100 million? The MC almost dropped the auction hammer in her hand. There was a look of disbelief in her eyes. At this moment, a man has once again become the focus of the audience. He is still Qiyu. Qiyu calmly said the two words, 100 million. He slowly walked past Ru Yu and towards the main platform for the third time today. His gaze was calm, but it was also filled with determination. Xiao Lu quickly turned around. Her beautiful long hair was like a black waterfall in the air, and her beautiful eyes were filled with surprise. 100 million? Mr. Qi, this seems to be the auction item that you donated. Qi Yu walked to Xiao Lu's side and faced her face. He smiled and said, "Yes, this is indeed the auction item that I donated. However, I did not say that I would let it go. I am offering 100 million to buy it back. I am completely representing the Long Yu Group. In addition to the previous auction items, I only hope to make some effort for charity today." Xiao Lu frowned slightly, and there was a look of disappointment in her eyes. Just as 70 million was Ms. Wang's bottom line, 80 million was also her bottom line. She looked at Qi Yu softly and said, "Sir, can't you give it to me?" Perhaps, if someone else was looked at by such a beauty with such a gentle look, they would immediately raise their hands and surrender. Unfortunately, she was facing Qi Yu. Qi Yu shook his head and said with a smile, "I'm sorry, Miss Xiao Lu. It's not that I don't want to give it to you, but I really can't, because I have already found a master for it. Of course, Miss Xiao Lu's temperament is enough to match it, but I have already determined its master when I prepared it." Xiao Lu took a deep look at Qi Yu, and there was no unhappiness in her beautiful eyes. She smiled and said, "Mr. Qi, you donated such a precious auction item and bought it back in person, which shows your support for charity. I can only give it up." After Qi Yu nodded to her, he looked at the rostrum. The MC immediately understood. After the first, second, and third confirmation, he bought the auction item that he provided with a sky-high price of 100 million. The reason why he did not compete for the other auction items in the second half of the auction was that he already had a plan in mind. The last auction was his real purpose. In this way, it was equivalent to donating 100 million to the All China Women's Federation for free. Even the world's famous rich people could not easily make such a big donation. Walking on the rostrum, this time, Qi Yu was greeted with warm applause. The chairman of the All China Women's Federation walked to the rostrum and handed the box containing the ancient heart to Qi Yu. She held his other hand and said excitedly, "Thank you for the generosity of the Long Yu Group and Mr. Qi. I also want to thank all the guests here today. I think with everyone's joint efforts, the establishment of our Women's and Children's Foundation will be more smooth. Originally, I was going to award the honorary consultant of the All China Women's Federation to the woman who won the most money in today's auction. However, it's a pity that Mr. Qi is a man, so I can only award a title to Mr. Qi on behalf of women and children. I don't think anyone here would have any objections, right?" Speaking up to this point, President Li laughed first. Qi Yu was stunned and said, "Title? What title?" Chairman Li took a deep look at him and announced loudly into the microphone, "From now on, Mr. Qi is the women's friend of our Yanwang Republic. Let's give a warm applause to thank Mr. Qi for everything he has done for charity today." Women's friend. Qi Yu looked at the chairman of the Women's Federation next to him, dumbfounded. Ruyue, who was under the stage, had already doubled over with laughter. Even the big star Xiao Lu, who had been calm before, covered her mouth and chuckled at this time. The guests did not expect that the chairman of the All China Women's Federation had a humorous side. The whole banquet suddenly became much more relaxed with the appearance of Qi Yu, the women's friend. "I don't know who Mr. Qi is going to give this ring to? I'm very curious." The one who spoke was Xiao Lu, who was closest to the rostrum. Obviously, she was very curious about this young man in front of her who was not handsome but very special. Holding the wooden box in his hand, Qi Yu smiled indifferently and said, "So be it. Miss Xiao Lu's question is precisely what I wanted to announce in front of all the guests here. This ancient heart is something that I have only obtained after experiencing many trials and tribulations. For me, its preciousness is not only reflected on the surface. I hope to be able to put it on the hand of my beloved woman. The energy aura flashed and disappeared. For the ordinary people present, it was impossible to feel. The banquet hall suddenly darkened. Only 2 light beams appeared where Chi-Yu and Ryua were, making them the focus of the audience at the same time. Under the pursuit of the light beam, Chi-Yu jumped down from the stage and walked step by step towards Ryua. Looking at his sincere and fiery eyes, Ryua's eyes became moist. At this moment, the sense of loss she felt earlier had long since flown beyond the highest heavens. What was 200 million? Compared to the gaze of the man in front of her, it was no longer important. The whole place was silent. Only the crisp sound of Chi-Yu's leather shoes as he walked forward could be heard. At this moment, under the light beam, his body seemed so tall and straight. Ryua's beauty was also completely set off, like a moon surrounded by stars. Zhang Jiuxiao's body had already recovered from the numbness, but even he had already forgotten about money. His heart was only filled with joy and excitement. He secretly prayed for his sister. Ryua, you have finally found a man worthy of your love. The master of the ceremony muttered to himself. Could it be that this has already been arranged? Otherwise, why would there be such a matching light? It's simply too perfect. If there is a man who can also treat me like this, then I... No one could hear the master of the ceremony's inner thoughts. At this moment, everyone's eyes were focused on Chi-Yu and Ryua. With firm steps, he finally arrived in front of her. My dear, we have been together for a long time, but I have never been able to do anything for you. I only hope that you can understand that my love for you will not change in this lifetime. Until the end of my life. Chi-Yu's voice sounded a little low, but when it entered the ears of the women present, it was filled with a magnetic feeling. Chi-Yu. Looking at the man in front of her, Ryua knew that her 6 months of bitter waiting had not been in vain. 6 months. Just as Ming Ming had said, she did not know how much pressure she had endured. However, for the sake of the Zodiac guardian god warriors, she had no choice but to conceal her true feelings in the depths of her heart. After all, if she were to panic, the morale of the Zodiac guardian god warriors would definitely be greatly affected. At this very moment, she was satisfied as she looked at Chi-Yu, who was filled with deep emotions. All of her grievances and unhappiness had completely vanished. She knew that this man was worthy of her love. In this lifetime, he was probably the only one who could move her ice-cold heart. Looking at the tears flowing from Ryua's eyes, sparkling and translucent, Chi-Yu took out the ring from the wooden box and took a step back. Under the gaze of the crowd, under the illumination of the 2 beams of light, he knelt on one knee and raised the ring in front of him. In a gentle voice, he said, Ryua, my precious, are you willing to let me put this ancient heart on your finger? Will you give me the right to love you forever? Silence. Although Chi-Yu's confession of his true feelings seemed so cliché, at this moment, under the witness of the ancient heart, it was filled with a sacred feeling. No one knew who was the first to say yes to him. Following that, the same voice resounded throughout the entire banquet hall. Regardless of whether it was a man or a woman, they all repeated the same 3 words. Say yes to him, say yes to him. Tears continued to fall. Looking at the flickering blue light of the ancient heart, the usually strong Ryua could no longer suppress the emotions in her heart. She also knelt on one knee. She no longer cared about her manners and fiercely threw herself into Chi-Yu's embrace. Under the illumination of the lights, under the gazes of all the female business elites and their companions, the 2 hugged each other. At this moment, no matter how many people there were around them, they only had each other in their hearts. A melodious voice rang out at the right time. The beautiful song recounted the sweetness of a pair of lovers. That heavenly voice did not require any accompaniment from any instruments, and it had already filled the entire banquet hall with a feeling of tenderness and sweetness. The song swirled in the air, making this moment so romantic. The hugging bodies slowly separated. Chi-Yu did not know when. He had already lifted up Ryue's slender and slightly trembling right hand. The blue light slowly fused with her as white as a spring onion finger. The place where the ring was worn was Ryue's middle finger. It represented that they were passionately in love. The cold feeling could not extinguish the fire in Ryue's heart. Feeling the surging energy from the ancient heart, her heart was already a little intoxicated. The faint blue light complemented her white skin, setting off her stunning beauty. At this moment, Ryue had finally become perfect. At least, in Chi-Yu's eyes, she was already absolutely perfect. Gently bringing Ryue's hand to his lips, Chi-Yu gently kissed the ancient heart on her hand. His scorching lips touched the ring that was emitting an icy aura, giving Ryue a feeling of ice and fire at the same time. All of these wonderful things had determined the deep feelings between them, determined that they would be bound together for the rest of their lives. Ryue's heart no longer belonged to herself. Instead, it was completely filled by that ruffian's figure. Let this ancient heart truly become a token of our love, okay? Chi-Yu said softly. Ryue nodded. She really wanted to laugh, but she did not know why, but crystal-clear tears flowed from her eyes. I haven't prepared anything. Chi-Yu shook his head and said with a light smile, Okay, what do I need to prepare? You are the greatest gift that the heavens have bestowed upon me. If I really want to exchange a gift, it's very simple. As he said that, he held Ryue's hand and gently swept it across her delicate face. Ryue only felt a slight chill on her face as 3 drops of tears fell. They were actually affected by the ancient heart and turned into ice crystals in the air. She could clearly feel the gentle energy completely enveloping the ice crystals. In the next moment, Chi-Yu had already carefully placed the 3 drops of tears into his own wooden box. Pure tears are the best proof of our love. Use them as your gift to me. As he said that, Chi-Yu supported Ryue's delicate body and slowly stood up. Under the background of that heavenly song, their bodies were tightly joined together, hugging each other's real bodies. Their hearts were intoxicated. Ryue did not even know how she walked out of the hotel, nor did she realize that Chi-Yu did not attend the last dance with her. But she was very clear that today, this day of summer, was going to be the happiest day of her life. All the guests who attended the charity party watched the Lamborghini leave. No one said a word as Chi-Yu and Ryue left, because they did not want to break the almost eternal romance. Watching the shadow of the car disappear, Xiao Lu's eyes became a little hazy. The ancient heart and the scene before her had already touched the heart of this extraordinary woman in the music industry. Inspiration surged like a tide. In her heart, she already had the idea of the next big album. The MC stood next to Chairman Li of the Women's Federation and asked in a low voice, Chairman, did you arrange all this? Chairman Li said blankly, Arrange? What arrangement? The MC smiled bitterly and said, If you didn't arrange it, how could the lighting work so well together? Even Miss Lu sang her most beautiful song at the most crucial moment, a phoenix seeking for a phoenix. You should have told me in advance. Oh no, it's better to know in person. This is the most amazing auction party I have ever attended. Chairman Li was stunned for a moment. But I really didn't arrange it. And in the banquet hall, there doesn't seem to be any special light projecting. The MC was speechless. In the Dragon Field courtyard, they hadn't felt so relaxed for half a year. After Chi-Yu and Ryue had left, all the Zodiac warriors stayed in the hall of the villa and listened to Wen Ting tell them everything that had happened. Wen Ting knew that everyone here was Chi-Yu's best friend and partner, so she didn't hide anything and told them everything truthfully. The Zodiac warriors were so surprised that they were a little numb. Even Master Zagru, who came out of the room and joined them, couldn't calm down. After all, everything she said could only be described as a myth. Have you digested it? Wen Ting smiled and looked at the people who had been stunned for half an hour. Master Zagru was the first to come back to his senses. Ba, this is really incredible. A human can actually return to the era of ancient beasts. No wonder No wonder you could recover Kieran's arm so quickly, and we couldn't feel his aura. To be honest, even I thought he was no longer in the human world. Yan Xiaoyi smiled and said, he is indeed no longer in the human world. He has gone to the mythical world. Boss is indeed boss. He is really strong. However, I want to see what the Xianyuan sword looks like. However, I think the biggest achievement of Boss's trip is not to recover Kieran's arm, but to bring back such a beautiful sister, Snow Girl. It's not easy. I finally have a chance. Snow Girl looked at him and gently lowered her head. Her previously cold face unexpectedly had a hint of gentleness. Her melting naturally wasn't because she had just met Yan Xiaoyi. The experience of the ancient beasts had completely melted her Emperor Heart Snow Lotus heart, and the familiar feeling of Dragon Field Courtyard made her feel as if she had returned home. When Ting unhappily said, "Little E, you can't have any thoughts of hitting our Snow Girl. Our Snow Girl is a good child. She hasn't even had a boyfriend yet." Yan Xiaoyi retorted, "I am also very pure. Sister One, I am still a virgin. Is this not considered pure?" Chapter 168. Everyone was stunned for a moment, then they couldn't help but laugh out loud. Yan Xiaoyi was furious. "Bullshit, perverted tiger, I want to duel with you." Su Dong chuckled and said with his standard sissy voice, "Duel? Alright. Then come, little guy, I want to learn from the boss, and let you know why flowers are so red." Hu Guang came over and said to Yan Xiaoyi, "Brother, I'm not a troublemaker, but if I were you, I wouldn't be able to tolerate what Su Dong said about you." Ian and Hu Guang were used to cooperating, so they immediately added, "That's right, our Xiao Yi is still a virgin today. Because he hasn't left the villa today. I say, Su Dong, you know his situation so well, don't tell me you've contributed your daisy to him. If that's the case, then you're simply too talented." F***ck, Su Dong pointed his two index fingers at Hu Guang and Ian. In terms of wretchedness, he was indeed a bit lacking compared to these two fellows. Dr. Guan Ping, who was at the side, held back his laughter and said, "You guys restrain yourselves, don't scare the little girl." His body had completely recovered after recuperating, and at the same time, because he had suffered the most serious injuries, he had eaten the most meat. After his injuries had healed, his strength had improved by leaps and bounds, especially the lion mastiff's attack power, which had become stronger than before. When Ting looked at the Zodiac Guardian God warriors and suddenly understood why Qiyu was in such a hurry to come back. That's right. He had so many good brothers here. Everything she had said before was not very detailed. After all, everything they had experienced was too complicated, especially the secret of the Kunlun mirrors. She only vaguely said that the three of them were able to return to the modern era by a special coincidence. Qiyu had once told her that it was better to keep the matter of having the ability to travel through time a secret for the time being. Furthermore, although Jida was Ming Ming's brother, he was not one of the Zodiac Guardian warriors. "Say, do you guys think Boss can convince elder sister Ryue?" the field mouse suddenly said, separating the furious and embarrassed Yan Xiaoyi from Su Dong. Everyone immediately changed the topic. Jida said, "I don't think it's easy. It's not like you don't know the temper of the Tyrannosaurus Rex. I reckon that if he wanted to convince Ryue, he wouldn't be able to do it in a day or two. Not to mention Ryue, even I wanted to beat him up. Of course, that was before I knew that he had gone to the ancient beast era." Hu Guang pursed his lips and said, "Tisk, you're so capable. When Qiyu comes back, you can talk to him face to face." "I don't think so. Qiyu is very talented." You look a bit like me. You're naturally handsome, unrestrained, and elegant. Naturally, you can turn Ryue, the Tyrannosaurus Rex, into a soft dragon." Yi sure pretended to vomit and said a very classic sentence, "I've seen shameless people, but I've never seen someone as shameless as you. How can a wretched cobra like you compare to Qiyu?" F***ck, you bitch, be careful that I don't fart you to death. Everyone was already used to the quarrel between Hu Guang and Ian. As long as these two wretched bespectacled men were together, it would be hard for them to stop. Zagru said helplessly, Ba, Miss Wenting, I think it's better for you to bring Miss Shui to rest first. Them. I have no choice. Modi smiled and said, That's right. It's not easy to make these people keep their mouths shut. Wenting glanced at Ming Ming and nodded lightly, saying, All right then, I'll bring Snow Girl to rest first. It's getting late, aren't you guys going to rest? Actually, she didn't even need to ask. From everyone's eyes, she already knew that they were all waiting for Chi Yu's return. Their excitement was completely from the bottom of their hearts. Ming Ming said, Let's wait for them to come back first. Long time no see, everyone has a lot to say to Chi Yu. Yan Xiaoi laughed strangely and said, That's not right, I have nothing to say to boss. I say, Ming Ming, if you have something to say to boss, you don't have to bring us along. Ming Ming glared at him and said, No one will think you're mute if you don't speak. Humph. Wenting smiled as she pulled Ming Ming's hand and whispered in her ear, Now, I'll return him to you and Ryu. In this half a year, I know how much pain and suffering you guys have gone through to wait for him to come back. Wait for him, he has never forgotten you guys. Women all had the desire to monopolize. No one would be willing to let someone else take away the love of their heart. However, before returning, in the Kunlun divine fantasy, Wenting had already thought it through very clearly. She knew that Chi Yu's extraordinariness had determined his fate, and also her fate. If she wanted to live happily, she had to give up some things. Only by doing so, would she be able to keep the one she wanted the most by her side. Ming Ming said gratefully, Sister Ting, thank you for taking care of him these days. When Ting smiled and said, We're a family, aren't we? Chi Yu and I are both orphans. Only by being together with you guys can our family be more complete. Furthermore, I'm a latecomer. To be able to hear you call me sister, I'm already very satisfied. The moment Wen Ting and Snow Girl went up the stairs, Yan Xiaoi and Su Dong got into position. Brother Su, you really can't fight with me over her. You have so many confidants. Give her to me this time. I've never been so moved before. Su Dong snorted and said, I've heard you say the same thing countless times. You want me to let you have such a high-quality item? Don't even think about it. Let's see who can win Snow Girl's heart first. You two perverts, do you only think with your lower body? Hu Guang swaggered over. He looked at Su Dong, then looked at Yan Xiaoi and boasted shamelessly, Why do I feel that Snow Girl looked at me more than you guys just now? Ian smiled sinisterly behind Hu Guang and said, That's right. She looked at you more often. However, I think it's because she's probably never seen such a perverted guy like you in her entire life. Alright, is there any meaning in you guys fighting like this? Guan Ping said righteously. Usually, among the Zodiac Guardian warriors, he had always been the least talkative. Now that he suddenly opened his mouth, it really made these perverts stare blankly for a moment. Their gazes all fell on him. Guan Ping smiled and said, Among us, besides Chi Yu and Grandmaster, I consider myself a decent person. I think you guys won't object. I think a gentle and kind girl like Snow Girl can only be protected by a gentleman like me. Brothers, you see I'm not young anymore. Why don't you give her to me this time? Hearing his words, everyone's gaze that had just solidified was suddenly filled with contempt. Yan Xiaoi said snappily, Damn, old Guan, even you came out to join in the fun. Are you big? Hu Guang is older than you. Guan Ping puffed out his chest and said, But I'm more handsome than him. Moreover, I'm a decent person. Su Dong curled his lips and said, That's right. You're a decent person. A decent person who came back from the Sun Nation. Everyone knows what the Sun Nation means. Using one word to replace it, that's day. Moreover, you just came back from that country. You actually dare to say that you're a decent person. It's simply too despicable. I think you should be called A.V. Guan. You're definitely a famous male AV star from the Sun Nation. Ian revealed a thoughtful look. Comrade Su's words seemed to have reminded me of something. Oh right, Hu Guang. Do you remember that, in the pornographic film we watched a few days ago, there was a figure whose back looked very similar to old Guan? Hu Guang nodded in deep thought and said, Yes, I also remember, it's the one who handed over the gun at 1, 2, 3. You guys. Guan Ping looked at these guys angrily, and finally choked out a sentence, I'll F***ck you guys. Yan Xiaoi laughed and said, F***ck us? You only have one gun, we have 4 chrysanthemums. Do you want to fight 1 against 4? I really doubt if you can do it. It's said that you have the blood of a lion. As far as I know, a lion's ability in that aspect is indeed very strong. Each time you do it for less than 30 seconds, but you can do it a few hundred times a day. In this aspect, you're definitely comparable to a certain perverted tiger. Su Dong glared at Yan Xiaoi, snorted, and scanned the crowd softly, saying, Your waist is not good, your kidneys are not good, all of you have to use Huiran kidney treasure. Jida looked at this group of guys dumbfounded, and swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Were these still the few listless people from before? Why did they all become lively after Qi Yu came back, and their lasciviousness was ignited again? Oh my God! Hurry up and strike a few lightning bolts to kill them all. Master Zagru smiled and shook his head helplessly, saying, My body is in the mortal world, and my ears don't hear anything. I didn't hear anything. However, Guan Ping, how did you get infected by them? It seems that the word serious can only be a joke. Vol rubbed his fat belly and said to himself, If we're talking about serious, I'm afraid I'm the only one. However, what I'm most interested in now is whether Boss can convince Sister Ryue. You guys are really blind. Even if you're interested in Snow Girl, I'm afraid you still have to ask Boss for permission. Didn't you hear her say that Boss is her father? Yes. The eyes of the group of perverted people lit up at the same time, and after looking at each other, Su Dong said first, No matter what, we must help Boss get past T-Rex. And let me do this, after all, I'm more familiar with Ryue. Yan Xiaoi said disdainfully, Familiar my ass. If you're not afraid of being beaten up, you can go. Don't you know T-Rex's temper? Hu Guang laughed and said, It's not impossible to solve the problem. Look, I have some Spanish gold flies here, I think Qi Yu will definitely need them. While saying that, he wretchedly took out a small bottle from his clothes that had never been clean and shook it in front of everyone. I can't stand you guys, I'm going to sleep. Modi really couldn't stand it anymore and glared at the group of perverted people and said to Vol, Bo Guang, you also go to sleep, don't let these guys pollute. Okay. Vol listened to Modi's words, although he also wanted to wait for Qi Yu to come back, but since Modi said it, he didn't want to wait for another day, and hurriedly followed. Ming Ming said with some worry, Sister has been in a very bad mood these days, and Qi Yu's temper is very stubborn. I don't know if he can explain to Sister Ryue clearly. Explaining is the same as covering up. Men don't need to explain. Hu Guang's small eyes flickered and said righteously. Ian laughed and said, If that's the case, I'm afraid we're going to have to welcome a pig-head boss. Oh, who are you calling a pighead? Qi Yu's lazy voice came from outside the door. The door opened, and with the sound of footsteps, he appeared in front of everyone. When everyone saw Qi Yu's appearance, they couldn't help but be stunned. When she left, Ryue was angry, but when she came back with Qi Yu, she had become a little bird. Ryue, who always paid attention to her image, was in the arms of Qi Yu at this time, leaning her head on his shoulder, with a faint blush on her pretty face. Her eyes were slightly closed, and she looked extremely shy, completely ignoring everyone present. No, the boss is the boss. Yan Xiaoi looked at Qi Yu and Ryue dully, and reluctantly squeezed out a sentence. Looking at Ryue in his arms, thinking of her wild appearance in the car just now, Qi Yu couldn't help but show a proud smile. If he wasn't in a hurry to come back, maybe he would have done it on the spot in the Lamborghini. Hu Guang nodded seriously and said, "Yes, the boss is the boss, it's simply the same as me." Looking at the appearance of the T-Rex, it obviously ate the effect of the Spanish golden fly. "It's exactly the same as I thought." Su Dong glared at Hu Guang and said snappily, "Why don't you go to hell?" He walked 2 steps quickly to the front of Ryu and Chi Yu and said with a smile, "Boss, oh no, from today on I've decided, I'll directly call you father-in-law. Father-in-law, please accept this son-in-law's bow." As he said that, he imitated the ancient style, cupped his fists, and actually bowed to Chi Yu. Su Dong's voice at such a close distance finally made Ryua sober, and she looked at Su Dong with a hazy gaze and asked doubtfully, "What are you doing?" Su Dong laughed and said, "Chi Yu, boss, I really admire you. You can even deal with Ryua's temper in such a short time, you're really talented. Go to the side, boss, even if you want a son-in-law, you have to accept me. How can you accept such a lewd guy?" Yan Xiaoi hated that he was a step late, and hurriedly came over and squeezed to Su Dong's side. Ian, Hu Guang and even Guan Ping ran over. Hu Guang said, "Chi Yu, if you accept me as your son-in-law, I'll also call you boss in the future, what do you think?" Ian snorted disdainfully and said, "Why don't you take a piss and look at yourself? Boss, choose me, I don't have a girlfriend yet." Although Guan Ping didn't say anything, his gaze was no longer pure. Looking at the 5 guys in front of him, Chi Yu nodded without batting an eyelid and said, "All right, how about this, let's go to the open space outside, and if any of you can exercise with me for an hour, I'll accept you as my son-in-law. What do you think?" Yan Xiaoi revealed an awkward expression and said, "Boss, this is a bit too much. You also know that your brother, oh no, your son-in-law's ability is really too lacking. However, I have a pure and kind heart, and my age is also the most suitable." Chi Yu smiled slightly. His smile was very gentle, but in the eyes of the 5 people in front of him, they felt a chill down their spines, and said, "I didn't ask you to do it one by one, the 5 of you can come at me together. How about adding my disciple? What a wicked disciple. I haven't taught you for a long time. 1 against 6? Boss, are you kidding me? Even if you recovered Kirin's arm during the ancient behemoth period, it's not like we haven't improved at all." Yan Xiaoi looked at Chi Yu in disbelief. Chi Yu patted Ryua's shoulder, and said telepathically, "Watch how I deal with these guys." Then, he said to the others, "It's up to you whether you want to come or not, 1 hour. Whoever moves faster will have the chance to become my son-in-law." As he said that, he let go of Ryua's hand, turned around and walked outside. Yan Xiaoi's group of 5 plus Jida. They looked at each other for only a second, and except for Jida, who was not in a hurry, the other 5 people chased after them like the wind. Standing on the lawn, Chi Yu's eyes revealed a warm smile. He had just stood still when the 6 people, Yan Xiaoi, Su Dong, Guan Ping, Ian, Hu Guang and Jida, filed out of the villa and stood in a row in front of him. Ryua held Ming Ming's hand and stood at the side. The 2 women whispered to each other while looking at Chi Yu from time to time. It was obvious that this battle was not very important to them. To them, Chi Yu's return was the most important thing. With his hands behind his back, Chi Yu looked at the 6 people in front of him and said with a smile, "Come on, it doesn't matter what method you use, as long as you can defeat me. If you can't do it, then whoever can last the longest in front of me will be my son-in-law. Then, I might recognize him as my son-in-law. Of course, he has to last for more than an hour." Yan Xiaoi laughed and said, "Boss, you are too careless. Brothers, let's go. Brothers, let's go." As he said that, he quickly dodged to the back. Apart from Jida, the other 4 people quickly surrounded him. The upcoming battle suddenly became different from before. Powerful auras were released from the tiger, snake, monkey, and dog Zodiac at the same time. Yan Xiaoi's retreat was not to avoid the battle. A white light shone from his body as he crossed his arms in front of his chest. No one knew what he was doing, but they could feel that the energy in his body was constantly condensing. Looking at the tacit cooperation of the 5 people, Chi Yu could not help but secretly nod. He knew that the sheep had a very special position among the Zodiac warriors because his main ability was healing. Although Jida was a step slower, he still quickly caught up. Although he did not have the special abilities of the Zodiac warriors, his constant intensive training had greatly improved the strength of his body. He could also be considered a fighter in the Yellow Flame Soul. With a smile, the light in Chi Yu's eyes softened a little. Come on. Su Dong and Guan Ping rushed out almost at the same time as Chi Yu's voice fell. The surging thundercloud force swarmed towards Chi Yu from 2 different directions. The energy of the tiger and the lion mastiff blocked all the space that Chi Yu could dodge. Having seen Chi Yu's ability, they were very clear about the magic of Kirin. Therefore, they did not hesitate to use their own thundercloud force to restrict Chi Yu's movement. Hu Guang and Ian were not idle either. Hu Guang's body instantly softened and he swam towards Chi Yu, while Ian leaped high with a golden light. A pair of sharp claws had already grown out of his hands. Chi Yu still stood there with his hands behind his back. He did not move at all. He did not seem to feel the surging energy at all. Just as Su Dong and Guan Ping's attacks were about to reach him, suddenly the wind blew. The green wind was solid. The condensed wind turned gray. Circles of wind patterns, with Chi Yu's body as the center, instantly spread to the surroundings. Every gust of wind easily cut through everything around it. Guan Ping and Su Dong simultaneously felt that their bodies were instantly locked by a powerful spiritual force. That terrifying spiritual pressure immediately made their bodies stop in the air for a moment. Countless green lights rose from the ground. It was no longer the wind, but slender blades of grass. The blades of grass merged with the wind. They were no longer grass, but sharp blades, shining with a green light. Countless sharp blades scattered in all directions. The next moment it was cutting. An ear-piercing sound rang out. It was as dense as silk being torn into everyone's ears. A net-like crack appeared on the originally seamless energy blockade. The surrounding space suddenly distorted. Guan Ping and Su Dong's attacks were actually disintegrated just like that. The most unlucky one was Hu Guang. The blades of grass suddenly grew, and his slippery body was blocked in an instant. Then they entangled him. Even with his agility, he could not break free from the blades of grass that seemed to have intelligence. The blades of grass, which instantly expanded and grew, were like a large cocoon, enveloping his body. A strong spiritual pressure came from every blade of grass. Suddenly, his slippery body became stiff, as if he was being forced by countless blades. Hu Guang did not dare to move. His feeling told him that if he tried to struggle, he would most likely be cut into pieces by those sharp blades. Boom! A bolt of purple lightning fell from the sky. Although An's body was constantly twisting and turning in the process of falling, the moment the purple lightning appeared, it was like a homing missile. In a 10,000th of a second, it had already stuck to his body. The golden light disappeared, and the pitch-black charcoal was thrown far away. The blades of grass carried the wind. They continuously brushed past Guan Ping and Su Dong. Although they tried to block with all their strength, when faced with these extremely fast and sharp blades of grass, their powerful protective energy was actually restricted to the point where it could not be used at all. When the energy inadvertently revealed a gap, many cracks had already appeared on their clothes. Retreat, they could only retreat. The grayish-white wind swept over. In the next moment, they had already retreated at a speed even faster than before. The grass on the ground moved rhythmically like a wave. Hu Guang and Ian's bodies were thrown out, landing right beside Guan Ping and Su Dong. 4 Zodiac Guardian God Warriors. All of them were 5 Clouds Zodiac Guardian God Warriors. They were actually defeated just like that. And the person who had defeated them was actually just standing there, not moving at all. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. When Hu Guang and Ian were flung out, Jida had rushed in front of Chiyu. However, his raised fist could not come down no matter how hard he tried. Of course, he knew the gap between himself and the Zodiac Guardian God warriors. Looking at Chiyu in front of him with his hands behind his back, it was as if he was looking at a demon king. A cold light flashed in Chiyu's eyes. His upper body did not move, but his right leg shot out like lightning. A standard whip kick was thrown out. Jida could only subconsciously use his hands to block it. An irresistible force was instantly transmitted into his body. His tall body flew into the air and fell heavily 20 meters away. Yan Xiaoi looked at everything that happened in front of him with his mouth agape. He even forgot to heal himself. He muttered to himself, "This is too scary. Oh my God! Is this real?" Chiyu looked at the 6 people in front of him coldly and shook his head gently. "No wonder Ryue said that you guys have been decadent for the past 6 months. Could it be that I don't even need to use my hands to kill you? With your current state, how can you support the title of the Zodiac Guardian God Warriors?" A milky white light was quickly emitted from Yan Xiaoi's hands and covered the bodies of the 5 people in front of him. At this moment, he could not help but secretly rejoice in his heart. Fortunately, he was not the type of Zodiac Guardian God Warrior who was good at fighting. Otherwise, he was afraid that the result would be even worse. Under the milky white light, the charred color on Ian's body gradually faded. However, there was not much left of his clothes. The original laughter in his eyes could no longer be seen. At the same time, a serious light appeared in the eyes of the Zodiac Guardian God Warriors. Their anger was completely ignited by Chi Yu's rude words. The contempt they had before was swept away. White, red, gold, and black. 4 colors of light shone from the tiger, dog, monkey, and snake at the same time. They were like 4 time bombs that could explode at any time. Jida only felt pain all over his body. In the face of absolute power, all his martial arts skills had no room to be used. He knew that he was no longer needed in this battle. With the help of Yan Xiaoi's healing energy, he slowly retreated to the side. "Tell me, what is your current strength?" Looking at the 4 people in front of him, Chiyu asked coldly. At this moment, he seemed to have become the master of this place. He was the youngest, but facing the 4 people whose average age was more than 30 years old, he completely suppressed them in terms of momentum. Taking a deep breath, Su Dong said, "Tiger, 5 clouds bottleneck, in the process of breaking through to 6 clouds. Guan Ping said, "Dog, 5 clouds." Ian and Hu Guang said the 2 words at the same time. Finally, Yan Xiaoi murmured, "Sheep, 3 clouds." The light in Chi Yu's eyes flickered slightly. 4-5 clouds Zodiac Guardian God Warriors, what kind of strength do they have? Let me tell you, I am now 6 clouds. Use your origin dissimulation. I will give you one more chance. Let's do it too. Ryue's voice came. If there was anything that brought to her just now, it was only shock. Seeing that her man had become so strong, how could she not be excited? Tyrannosaurus Rex's blood was boiling. Holding Ming Ming's hand, they slowly walked over. Other than the Zodiac King, Chiyu, 7 of the 9 Zodiac Guardian God Warriors had arrived. Moreover, they only had one target. Dragon, 7 clouds. Under Chiyu's surprised gaze, Ryue announced her strength. Chicken, 4 clouds bottleneck to 5 clouds. Ming Ming looked at Chiyu with a smile, but her body had already lit up with a rainbow light. After absorbing Chiyu's Kirin bloodline, her improvement could be said to be the fastest. Now, she was close to the 5 clouds level. What surprised Chiyu the most was Ryue. As expected of a genius among the Zodiac Guardian God Warriors, she was already 7 cloud. Although 7 clouds Ryue and 4 clouds Ming Ming alone were not enough to pose a threat to Chiyu, their addition undoubtedly greatly increased the strength of the Zodiac Guardian God Warriors. Dragon, tiger, snake, goat, monkey, chicken, and dog, the 7 Zodiac Warriors surrounded Chiyu in a semicircle. Chapter 169. When he was on his way to the Kunlun Mountains to search for the Kunlun mirrors, he had thought about many things. After the tempering of the ancient beasts, Kirin, the king of the Zodiac, had become more and more mature. At that time, he had already made some plans for his return. Finding all the Zodiac guardian warriors and improving the strength of his brothers were his top priorities. After witnessing the strength of the Bull Demon King, he knew how much he was lacking. The Bull Demon King in his body had always been a ticking time bomb. Who knew if this most powerful beast in history would be able to break free from the mutual life and death domain? Who knew if there would be another fellow at the level of the Bull Demon King in this era? Any luck could lead to failure. Only absolute strength and the most perfect preparation could deal with all the variables. It was definitely not enough to rely on the strength of one person. Therefore, it was imperative to improve the overall strength of the Zodiac Guardian warriors. Zagru stood at the entrance of the villa and watched from afar. He could feel Chi Yu's completely restrained aura. He could not help but nod to himself. Kirin had finally grown up and matured. Although he was still a ruffian, he was a completely different ruffian. The aura of a true leader had been revealed from his body. Don't hold back. I want to see your true strength. Chi Yu's voice was cold, but there was also an unquestionable firmness in it. The gentleness on Ryue's pretty face disappeared. The coldness of the Tyrannosaurus Rex reappeared. Once she entered a battle, she would immediately enter the battle mode, even if she was facing the man she loved the most. It was as if she was born to fight. She floated forward and walked out from the 7 Zodiac Guardian God Warriors. With a low dragon roar, her body began to change. A faint white mist surrounded her body. Cloud Dragon. A white flowing light and a strong dragon aura appeared in front of Chi Yu in an instant. The familiar Tyrannosaurus Rex appeared in front of Chi Yu again. He sensed that Ryue's energy aura was stronger than before. Chi Yu couldn't help but reveal a trace of gratification in his eyes. He also moved his hands out from behind his back. Who could look down on the most aggressive dragon warrior among the Zodiac Guardian warriors? Furthermore, it was a 7-cloud dragon warrior. Sparkling and translucent white scales, 2 large wings stretched out on her back, and the scales covered every part of her body. There was a white mask on her face. The mask was in the form of light and shadow, and it looked somewhat illusory. The mask was exactly the same as her face, and only a pair of bright eyes could be seen. It covered every part of his body. The white scales continued to extending from her waist down to her short battle skirt that was only 8 inches long. Her upper body was also covered in thick scales that resembled armor. In the center of her chest, a milky white bead the size of a ping-pong ball was constantly emitting waves of white light. She had a head of strange long blue hair, which was draped over her back. There were 2 protrusions on the top of her head, and triangular sharp points extended from the armor on her shoulders. Her dragon eyes were shining, turning from blue to red, like 2 rubies, in sharp contrast with the white scales all over her body. Her arms were spread out on both sides of her body. The 3-inch-long sharp claws on her fingers were shining with a cold light. The awe-inspiring dragon aura, as if it was real, locked on Chi Yu's body. The dragon moved, and the Zodiac moved. As Ryue's nature mutation unfolded, all the Zodiac Guardian warriors finally showed their strongest side in front of Chi Yu. Guan Ping's body emitted a golden red light. His body, which was not very tall, instantly swelled up. His low roar gradually became louder, and his calm eyes not only became sharper. At the same time, he also became more ferocious. A strong aura, accompanied by a sense of fiery energy, surged out. After absorbing part of the energy of the NEI pill, his original Lion Mastiff's ability had changed due to the addition of the fire attribute. Ian's body was still thin, but his whole body had been covered with golden hair. At the same time, the sharp claws on his hands had also reached about a foot long. His body bent down. The numbness from the thunder and lightning had been completely recovered with the help of Yan Xiaoi. His sharp and agile eyes were firmly fixed on Qiyu. Dark green scales, sinister eyes, wretched and agile movements, representing the power of snakes. Hu Guang's body actually disappeared, completely merging with the surrounding environment. This was an ability after his nature mutation, called nature fusion, which had a special skill similar to that of a chameleon. A snake's attack was always sudden, and it was a surprise attack hidden in dark corners. The colorful feathers, accompanied by Ming Ming's delicate body, looked very attractive, like a rainbow-colored feather dress, wrapping around her body. She spread her arms to both sides, and a more dazzling light than a peacock spreading its tail spread out to the surroundings. However, the rainbow-colored feathers shone with a metallic luster. This time, Su Dong did not move forward. Instead, he retreated with Yan Xiaoi. White and black tiger fur had already appeared on his body, and the wings on his back were erected. The aura on his body became stronger, especially the pair of tiger paws that had grown 3 times bigger, looked even more shocking. At the same time, a dark red light also lit up on his body, and it was unusually eye-catching against the white fur. That was the fire ability that the Su family was originally good at. At this time, it had already merged with his Zodiac Guardian ability. The last one, and also the one who changed the slowest, was naturally the weakest, Yan Xiaoi. He and Vol were the last ones to start cultivating, and they did not have innate abilities. Although they had been cultivating hard, they had only barely reached the level of 3 clouds, and this was even with the help of the other Zodiac Guardian warriors and after eating the contract meat. This was the first time that Qiyu saw the Zodiac sheep's nature mutation. White fur covered his whole body, and at this time, Yan Xiaoi looked a little soft. A pair of long goat horns grew out of the top of his head, and a soft white light spread in the form of ripples. Layers of energy aura were constantly strengthening, and when the various energy molecules in the air came into contact with his body, they seemed to have a certain change. The Zodiac Guardian warriors who had completely transformed into the nature mutation flower gave Qiyu a completely different feeling. A huge pressure came from all directions. 7 people, 14 eyes, were all focused on him, and all kinds of different energy auras were secretly spreading in the air. Ryue, at the peak of these energies, hid a trace of softness in her cold eyes. Qiyu, let us see what you have obtained in the ancient giant beast era. Qiyu smiled and said, I will satisfy you. I'll make sure you're satisfied. Let's see if you can last an hour in my hands. Let's see if you can last an hour against me. Even with the addition of Ru Yu and Ming Ming, it didn't weaken his confidence in winning. Confidence was built in battles. No matter how strong the enemy was, if he did not even have confidence, then he had already lost half of the battle. Even when he was facing the Bull Demon King, he did not back down, let alone facing his companions now. He slowly stretched his hands to both sides of his body, and with Qiyu as the center, the 5 square meters around him suddenly lit up. The Zodiac Guardian warriors led by Ryue were surprised to see this. Purple, blue, red, and cyan energy molecules actually transformed into a fine electric light. They quickly surged towards Qiyu. The Armani suit disappeared, and Qiyu's body was already shrouded by the 4-colored light. The tattoo of Kirin on his chest was so clear. The 4-colored thundercloud force behind him transformed into a screen. The huge energy aura, from the tattoo of Kirin on his body, revealed the most powerful strength, as if it was alive. In the absence of any sound, the Zodiac Guardian warriors seemed to have heard Kirin's roar. At this moment, Ryue had already become the commander of the Zodiac Guardian warriors. She shouted coldly, Ian, Ming Ming, follow me and attack from above. The rest of you, attack from below. The dragon wings behind her instantly spread out, and her delicate body soared into the air. With the support of her 7-cloud dragon power, the first stance of the dragon leaping 18 strikes was formed in an instant. Countless white stars condensed in the air, bringing great pressure to Chi-Yu from above. After the mutation, Ian was obviously different. With a scream, his body soared into the air, and in the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the night sky, leaving only a golden light spot. Ming Ming moved at the same time as him. Although Ming Ming did not have the ability to fly, with the support of the pair of 7-colored wings, she could float in the air. The 7-colored energy condensed into energy feathers around her body, and they quickly rotated around her. The attack from above had already taken shape, but the main force from below was Guan Ping. Guan Ping took a step forward, clasped his hands together, and raised them high above his head. Circles of dark golden light rapidly condensed in his hands in the shape of a vortex. The huge energy actually caused the surrounding air to distort, showing how powerful the energy aura was. The first to attack was Ryue. Countless light spots floated in the air towards Chi-Yu like moths to a flame. The seemingly strange white light spots had covered every corner of Chi-Yu's body in an instant. In order to prevent Chi-Yu from escaping her energy control, Ryue had already used her dragon breath to lock onto his position, but she still used a large area attack. The dragon-winged stars unleashed by a 7-cloud rank was definitely incomparable to the dragon-winged stars unleashed by a 5-cloud rank. Although there was no ear-piercing sound, each white light spot seemed to be alive, constantly changing its position. Chi-Yu's hands hung by his sides. Only when the white speck of light was about to reach him did he once again raise his left hand. At this moment, the dragon-winged star's energy was fully unleashed. The moment they surrounded Chi-Yu's body from all directions, they rushed towards Chi-Yu without wasting any time. Good! Chi-Yu roared as a silver light shot out from his left hand. A huge shield floated out from his body as he spun gracefully, creating a layer of light. In just an instant, countless surging sounds of energy colliding could be heard. The solid defense of the Kirin mirror was fully displayed in front of the Zodiac guardian god warriors at this moment. Chi-Yu's movements were very fast. Under the effect of the Kirin mirror, he actually set up a layer of barrier around his body without any hesitation. Along with loud popping sounds, every energy light spot was blocked by the thundercloud force injected by the Kirin mirror. Ryue was surprised to find that the starlight energy of the dragon-winged stars she unleashed would be neutralized by a strange energy once it came into contact with the Kirin mirror. When the starlight energy erupted, it would always be cleverly directed to the side and collide with other starlights. Therefore, on the surface, it seemed that Chi-Yu was being bombarded by Ryue's attack, but in fact, he didn't need to expend much energy to block it. However, since the battle had already begun, Ryue didn't have a chance to explain to the other Zodiac guardian god warriors. Ming Ming's attack followed closely after Ryue's. If one had to say who had the most dazzling attack, it would naturally be the chicken Ming Ming. Her rainbow-colored feathers formed a beautiful rainbow in the air and spun towards Chi-Yu's body. However, the rainbow-colored energy feathers with a metallic luster weren't as gentle as they looked. They were actually sharp blades. Even the blades of grass that Chi-Yu had moved previously couldn't compare to them. Ming Ming and Ryue cooperated very well. Just as the dragon-winged star's attack ended, the rainbow-colored rainbow arrived in front of Chi-Yu and seized the opportunity when Chi-Yu had just exhausted his previous energy. However, would Chi-Yu's previous energy really be exhausted? Ming Ming wanted to show off her strength in front of the man she loved, but her man gave her an even greater surprise. A ball of silver light was emitted from Chi-Yu's palm. From Ming Ming's angle, she could see that there was an extremely bright ball of silver light in Chi-Yu's palm. The silk-like silver light expanded to a diameter of about 10 meters in an instant, just in time to encircle her rainbow-colored rainbow. There was no sound of collision, and there was no surge of energy. The rainbow-colored rainbow disappeared so easily. However, the light formed by the silk-like threads didn't stop. As Chi-Yu's right hand shook, he flung it out and shrouded Guan Ping. At this moment, Guan Ping's energy had completely condensed. Streaks of dark red electric light swam along with his golden red fists. The condensation of energy had reached its peak. Seeing that Qi Yu was about to attack him, Guan Ping punched out with his clasped fists without hesitation. As the light rippled like water, a highly condensed golden red light with a diameter of 1 foot burst out and bombarded the center of the silk-like threads. After throwing the silk-like light, Qi Yu didn't even look in Guan Ping's direction. His body had already soared into the air. At this moment, facing the huge pressure brought by the Zodiac Guardian warriors, he couldn't hold back anymore. Black armor appeared on his body in an instant, and his long silver hair draped over his shoulders. His silver eyes emitted a scorching light, and in a flash, he had already closed in on Ryue in the air. His right fist directly punched towards Ryue's chest. To him, the biggest threat among the Zodiac Guardian warriors was still the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Ryue had just activated her dragon wings chasing stars, but she didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. The white armor on her body expanded instantly. Taking advantage of the time Ming Ming and Guan Ping attacked, she had already entered the second stage of mutation. When Qi Yu soared into the air and used the first stage of his Kirin mutation, Ryue just happened to complete the second stage of mutation. Ryue obviously didn't expect Qi Yu to attack her so quickly, completely ignoring Guan Ping's attack. She also didn't expect that Ming Ming wouldn't be able to hold him back for even a moment, so she immediately panicked. The wings on her back spread and retracted, and her body immediately tilted. Her slender legs kicked out 21 times towards Qi Yu, who was pouncing towards her at lightning speed. Appear. Qi Yu didn't dodge, nor did he use any techniques. He forcefully used his Kirin arm to clash head-on with Ryue's legs. Amidst the loud bang, Ryue's body was bounced back, while Qi Yu, who was in the air, only paused for a moment. For some reason, Ryue had a feeling of powerlessness in her heart. The energy of Ming Ming's attack wasn't any weaker than Qi Yu's, but when her 21 kicks collided with Qi Yu's right fist, his Kirin arm was always able to retract and release. She first diverted a part of her thundercloud force before attacking head-on. In the situation where the energy was equal, she was actually at a disadvantage. At this moment, Ming Ming and Guan Ping were even more surprised. The energy feather that Ming Ming released disappeared under the silver light, and Guan Ping's all-out attack also followed in her footsteps. However, under his violent bombardment, the silver light also disappeared at the same time. Qi Yu blasted Ryue away with a punch, but his movements didn't stop. He stepped on his Kirin arm, and his body quickly turned into a series of afterimages in the air. He drilled out of the shroud of Ming Ming's iron wing technique, and the ear-piercing sound of the rainbow-colored feather drifted past. It narrowly passed by Qi Yu's body. Of course, this wasn't luck, but precise calculation. The golden light fell from the sky silently. The sharp claws didn't reflect any light, and the claw shadows were almost solid, quietly hanging on to Qi Yu's shoulders from behind. For Ian, who relied on gravity to cover a distance of tens of meters, it was only a moment's work. However, at this moment, it was as if Qi Yu had eyes on the back of his head. He had never forgotten about the Zodiac monkey that soared into the sky. His left hand swung up like lightning, and a silver light shot into the sky. The mirror-like light looked very strong, and it spun like a butcher's knife, drawing a beautiful arc, just in time to meet Ian's falling body. What Qi Yu threw was the Kirin mirror. In the past, he had used this method of attack with the Kirin mirror to destroy a golden-winged eagle with his own hands. Although Ian's strength wasn't weak, compared to the golden-winged eagle, he was still quite a bit weaker. However, the Zodiac monkey had the advantage of being a Zodiac monkey, and that was agility. With a sudden thought, a silver light flashed, and Ian didn't even have time to think. His body had already moved 3 feet to the side in the air, and his feet tapped on the Kirin mirror a few times. The strong rebound force threw him to the side. At this moment, The golden fur on his body was drenched in cold sweat. If he had reacted any slower, the outcome would have been obvious. From the start of the battle until now, only a few seconds had passed, and Jida, who was watching from below, was dazzled. At this moment, the combat power of the warriors of the Zodiac started to show. Screams, ear-piercing screams pierced Chi Yu's ears like needles. Even with his strength, his body couldn't help but freeze for a moment. Although it was a moment that was calculated subtly, it was still fatal to him, who was facing the attacks of the warriors of the Zodiac. Almost at the same time, Ryue and Ming Ming surrounded Chi Yu. Countless shadows of fists and feet with surging thundercloud force attacked Chi Yu's body. Guan Ping, who was below, had already leaped high and punched with both fists. The position of his attack was right at Chi Yu's feet. At this moment, Yan Xiaoi, who hadn't moved, suddenly revealed a strange smile, and a milky white light floated from his body. His thundercloud force was much weaker than the other warriors of the Zodiac, and it was only now that he had gathered enough energy for his strongest move. The milky white light floated in the air in the shape of a chrysanthemum. It was light and seemed harmless, but it had already reached Chi Yu's side. Chi Yu's adaptability and battle experience could be said to be unmatched by any of the Zodiac Guardian God warriors present. Even under such a siege, he was still able to react quickly. The purple light surrounding his body distorted, and Ming Ming and Ryue simultaneously felt their attacks met with a strong obstruction, especially Ming Ming. She only had the strength of a 5-cloud warrior, and her body was slightly numb. Her delicate body was thrown out, and Ryue's fists and feet met the explosion of the thundercloud force without holding back. Chi Yu's feet stepped on Guan Ping's fists, and his body shot up like a cannonball. A bright light shone from his hands, and the fiery red energy turned into a long rainbow, directly slashing towards Ian, who was in the air. Ian looked at the scorching energy that was driven by a special blade-shaped weapon towards his body, and he cursed in his heart. Why was it so unlucky again? He didn't dare to clash with Chi Yu head-on. His body stopped in the air for a moment, and since he couldn't fly, he forcefully changed his direction and landed on the ground. At the same time, his claws crisscrossed in the air, forming a golden light net. He tried to block Chi Yu's attack, and at the same time delay time. Chi Yu snorted coldly. How could the weapon created by Kirin be blocked by ordinary energy? Only the freakish Xianyuan sword could easily destroy the weapon it had transformed into. When the long blade rolled up, Ian's attack had already been cut into pieces. However, at this moment, a milky white light had quietly attached itself to Chi Yu's body. It wasn't that Chi Yu wasn't vigilant enough, but the milky white chrysanthemum that Yan Xiaoi sent out did not have any energy aura at all. Even Chi Yu, who was extremely sensitive to spiritual power, couldn't sense it in time. With the chrysanthemum on his body, Chi Yu, who was about to chase after Ian, couldn't help but become sluggish, and the energy in his body seemed to be blocked. His movement speed in the air was instantly reduced by 40%. F***ck good job, Yan Zhuhua. Chi Yu naturally understood immediately that this was Yan Xiaoi's special ability. However, because he hadn't experienced it before, he was suddenly bound by his energy. His body instantly became sluggish. Ming Ming, Ryue, and Guan Ping all surrounded him at this moment. Even Ian, who was on the ground, borrowed the force from the ground and pounced in Chi Yu's direction again. Under the influence of Yan Xiaoi, the weakest among the Zodiac Guardian warriors, the situation suddenly changed. Chi Yu, who was originally able to resist, was suddenly surrounded. At this moment, Su Dong, who was standing beside Yan Xiaoi, suddenly moved. His arms were stretched out horizontally on both sides of his body. He didn't flap his wings, but his body gradually floated up from the ground. The red light condensed into the shape of a sun behind him, emitting a blazing white light. It was as if his eyes were real and focused on Chi Yu. The incomparably terrifying energy aura actually gathered almost all of his energy. At this moment it was still rising, Great Sun Destroyer Divine Art? Chi Yu had been fighting all this time, but his observation skills were very sharp. Seeing that Su Dong had finally unleashed his power after accumulating it for a long time, he immediately recalled the powerful attack of the Su family's patriarch at Tianxiang Mountain, Gui Jianchou. When the Great Sun Destroyer Divine Art was used by Su Dong, its power was not inferior to that of the Su family's master. After all, he was a Zodiac guardian that was close to the 6th cloud level. His own thundercloud force and the Su family's special ability allowed him to improve this special ability to the extreme. Previously, Chi Yu had used the special use of the Silver Dragon cover to neutralize the attacks of Ming Ming and Guan Ping. But at this moment, he was somewhat uncertain whether the Silver Dragon cover, which specialized in neutralizing energy, could completely neutralize the Great Sun Destroyer Divine Art. The Silver Dragon cover was originally a directional domain. In other words, when the Silver Dragon cover was activated, the user could no longer use energy attacks, and the Silver Dragon cover could only cover a certain area. Therefore, even powerful existences like Emperor Huang and the Mirror Fairy had no way to deal with the energy immunity of the Silver Dragon cover. After much consideration, Chi Yu made improvements to the Silver Dragon cover. The improved Silver Dragon cover was used as an energy attack, and its use was still to neutralize the energy of the enemy's attack. Although the effect was much worse than the real Silver Dragon cover, the advantage was that his own energy consumption was greatly reduced, and it would not affect the use of his other energy. It also made the Silver Dragon cover more flexible. This could be clearly seen when he neutralized the attacks of Ming Ming and Guan Ping just now. However, the Silver Dragon cover was no longer completely immune to energy. Its power was greatly reduced, so once it encountered a powerful attack, it would not be able to exert the effect of energy immunity. Therefore, when Chi Yu saw Su Dong activate the Great Sun Destroyer Divine Art, he could not help but be slightly surprised. In fact, Su Dong was a very proud person, but he usually did not show it easily, especially in front of his companions. However, just now, Chi Yu did not even move, and he easily neutralized their joint attack. This had completely aroused the pride in his heart, so he did not hesitate to consume energy and used his most powerful attack, the Great Sun Destroyer Divine Art that was combined with the Zodiac Tiger's ability. His pair of tiger palms had already turned blood-red, and as he pushed his hands forward, his body had already merged with the red sun behind him. The energy became even hotter, and the faint roar of a tiger constantly shook Chi Yu's mind. At this moment, Chi Yu was under the siege of 4 Zodiac Guardian warriors. Although Kirin was profound, it was definitely not easy for him to break out of the siege with a strong person like Ruyue. Seeing that the Great Sun Destroyer Divine Art was about to be activated, would he be able to deal with such an attack? A light of approval appeared in Chi Yu's eyes. After all, his companions did not really waste half a year's time. In the air, on the ground, there was a quick attack, and there was also a sneaky poisonous snake. All of this was the perfection of their cooperation. Even with the strength of a 6-cloud warrior, it was already difficult to deal with their joint attack. One should know that the strength of the 6-cloud warrior, Kirin, had already surpassed the strength of an ordinary Zodiac warrior. The second stage of Kirin's mutation was instantly activated. Chi Yu shouted, and the huge thundercloud force in his body instantly erupted. That was the source of Kirin's energy. Surrounded by black and silver light, the Zodiac warriors around him were forcibly shaken away. Huge wings fluttered, and the huge thundercloud force instantly condensed. The feeling of being filled with power made him look up to the sky and roar. "All right, I'll show you my true strength." Chi Yu moved, and his body moved like lightning. Compared to before, his speed was at least twice as fast. His gaze swept across the Zodiac warriors in front of him, and the strong spiritual pressure immediately made them unable to fully exert their energy. At the same time that Qi Yu completed the second stage of mutation, Yan Xiaoyi's strong anus energy could no longer be restrained. After all, the gap in strength was still too big. How could his thundercloud force restrain Qi Yu, who was in the double mutation? Chapter 170. This time, Qi Yu went all out. Although it was 1 against 4, under the effect of his 4 thundercloud force, he did not feel the slightest bit overwhelmed. The water thundercloud force attacked Guan Ping, the fire thundercloud force attacked Ryue, the wind thundercloud force attacked Ming Ming, and the thundercloud force attacked in purple, blue, red, and green. 4 shadows of fists lit up at the same time, bombarding the 4 Qi Yu. Because Ryue's strength was the strongest among the Zodiac Guardian warriors, Qi Yu took extra care of her. The fire thundercloud force was mixed with Kirin's origin energy. Together with Kirin's arm, it exploded with tyrannical strength. 4 roars sounded almost at the same time. The 4 figures around Qi Yu were either sent flying or falling. Unexpectedly, none of them were able to resist this full power punch. The second stage of Kirin's transformation was the ink Kirin of the 4 auspicious clouds. How could it be easy to resist? Qi Yu's expression changed slightly. The wings on his back were fully opened. A dark red light was emitted from Kirin's wings. Clearly visible energy elements quickly gathered towards his body. Qi Yu's movements were very fast. At the same time, when the 4 punches knocked the 4 people away, a silver light had already gathered in his hand. A long bow appeared out of thin air. The length of the bow was actually about the same as his height. When he pulled the bow, the energy became the best arrow. The bow was the king of all weapons. The energy of the 4 elements quickly gathered towards the bow from Qi Yu's right arm. The fusion of purple, blue, red, and green looked very dazzling. Qi Yu pulled the bow with his right hand. The bow was like a full moon. The surging energy aura gathered on the sword. A silver bowstring. It looked so dazzling. The energy arrow of the 4 elements was aimed at Su Dong, who was like a rising sun. The Sun Destroyer magic had been fully unleashed, but what he was facing was Qi Yu's most powerful attack. Even Emperor Huang had once been blocked by Qi Yu's completely condensed energy attack. Could the great Sun Destroyer divine art withstand it? At this moment, Qi Yu's eyes had turned pure silver. The energy in his body was raised to the extreme. Although his thundercloud force was only at the 6 cloud level, it was a fully condensed thundercloud force. The condensed energy was concentrated on the arrow, and there was no need for any mental pressure to assist it. Su Dong's mind was completely locked on by the arrow. Su Dong knew that this was an attack that couldn't be avoided at all. The fiery red light quickly engulfed Su Dong's body. The Sun Destroyer magic had completely merged with his body. Su Dong's attack was beyond Qi Yu's expectations. The huge sunlight emitted. It actually condensed into a point 3 meters away from him. A red light suddenly shot out and shot towards Qi Yu. The bowstring was released. There was a soft hum. The arrow couldn't be seen with the naked eye. The long arrow condensed by the 4-colored light pierced the red light in an instant. There was no sound of an explosion. There was only the rapid retreat of the red light. After releasing the arrow, Qi Yu's body didn't stop. He didn't even look at the effect of his arrow. His body instantly fell. He just happened to dodge the attacks of Ian and Ming Ming. However, Qi Yu's fall also happened to meet Guan Ping. Guan Ping couldn't fly, and he didn't have an abnormal jumping ability like Ian. However, his attack on the ground was second only to Ryue among the Zodiac Guardian warriors. His strong body suddenly stuck close to Qi Yu. After all, he was facing 7 Zodiac Guardian warriors. Guan Ping was very clear. As long as he could entangle him, the final victory would belong to his side. As his body fell, Qi Yu's flexibility was greatly reduced. Seeing that the golden red fist was already in front of him, he didn't have time to dodge. His left hand blocked Guan Ping's fist. At the same time, the longbow in his right hand changed. A huge silver hammer suddenly smashed towards Guan Ping's chest. With a loud bang, Guan Ping's body was shaken and flew out. Blood spurted from his mouth. He had already been seriously injured by Qi Yu's attack. Of course, under the situation that Qi Yu used a large amount of thundercloud force and continuously launched attacks, he was also shaken by Guan Ping's all-out attack. His face became even paler. With his combat experience, Qi Yu didn't stay at the same place. He turned into a shadow and quickly retreated to the side. It turned out that his cautiousness was necessary. A black figure scuttled past the position that Qi Yu had just left. Hu Guang, who had been patiently waiting in the dark, finally launched an attack. The poison of the black mamba instantly spread and enveloped Qi Yu's body. The black mamba was the most aggressive poisonous snake. Hu Guang fully embodied this point. He didn't move, but once he launched an attack, it would immediately bring about a storm. After the origin mutation, physical attacks could barely hurt him. Even energy attacks couldn't completely lock his body. From a strange angle, the poisonous snake fangs crazily attacked Qi Yu. Qi Yu's body was retreating. The other Zodiac Guardian warriors had also closed in. Only Su Dong was still floating in the air. The red light condensed by the Sun Destroyer magic had completely disappeared. Blood flowed continuously from the corner of Su Dong's mouth. Floating in the air, he could only rely on his tiger wings to maintain his body's balance. He had already tried his best to condense the energy he had launched. However, compared to Qi Yu's 4 elements energy arrow, it was still a lot worse. However, Su Dong could be proud. If it wasn't for the threat that his Sun Destroyer magic brought to Qi Yu, which made Qi Yu launch the 4 elements energy arrow with all his strength, he probably wouldn't have been surrounded by the other Zodiac Guardian warriors. Su Dong clearly felt that his body could no longer move. There was a bowl-sized hole in the right side of his chest. Blood kept spurting out. There was no feeling of pain, only numbness. He knew very well that if Qi Yu's arrow had been aimed at the left side of his chest, he would have left this world forever. The glory of that arrow was indeed something that the Sun Destroyer magic couldn't resist. Qi Yu also had no choice. After all, he was only one person. If he couldn't defeat them one by one, he would be besieged by the 7 Zodiac Guardian warriors. The final outcome would be defeat. A soft white light enveloped Su Dong's body. The bleeding wound solidified. No more blood flowed out. A trace of power came from the milky white light. The wound on his chest also healed quickly. Finally feeling pain, Su Dong looked gratefully at Yan Xiaoyi below. He knew that there was no room for him to participate in today's battle. There was no longer any room for him to participate, so he reluctantly folded his wings and descended diagonally. Ming Ming, Ian, Hu Guang and Guan Ping, who was slightly injured, seemed to have regarded Qi Yu as their mortal enemy. Their powerful attacks blocked all of Qi Yu's escape route. Among them, Hu Guang was the biggest threat to Qi Yu. His black mamba's poisonous fangs were everywhere, threatening him at all times. At the same time, the faint fishy smell also made Qi Yu feel dizzy. However, even in the face of the siege of the 4 Zodiac Guardian warriors, Qi Yu relied on his speed and the absolute power manifested by the condensation of energy to resist. At this time, it was not that he couldn't break through the siege, but his attention was not on the 4 Zodiac Guardian warriors around him. His spiritual power was locked on the sky. A large cloud was condensing in the sky. In the pitch-black night, the white clouds still emitted a gentle glow. Within the clouds, a pair of resplendent ruby eyes stared down at Qi Yu as a bright dragon roar resounded from the sky. However, the area of the dragon roar was limited to the dragon field courtyard. Yes, Ryue did not follow the other Zodiac Guardian warriors to besiege Qi Yu. It was not because she was injured under Qi Yu's special care, but because the Tyrannosaurus Rex finally launched her most powerful attack, the Dragon God. The gigantic white dragon had crystalline scales and a boundless domineering aura. Its gigantic dragon claws wandered through the clouds, and its gigantic body had already completely enveloped the 5 people fighting below. At this moment, Ryue's thundercloud force had been raised to the limit. Having reached the seven-cloud realm, she could finally use the power of the divine dragon true body. It was also because of her appearance that Chi-Yu felt nervous. The divine dragon true body. The huge dragon that Ryue transformed into was actually more threatening to Chi-Yu than the white snake. They were both white dragons, but Ryue was a white dragon with wings, a natural white dragon. From any point of view, her rank was higher than the white snake's. The huge energy aura did not make Chi-Yu feel like retreating. Feeling the huge pressure that Ryue brought to his body and spirit, Chi-Yu's eyes revealed a look of appreciation. In today's battle, the biggest surprise to him was Ryue and Su Dong. Although Su Dong's sun destruction magic needed a long time to condense energy, it was enough to make Chi-Yu excited. If he had not quickly condensed his energy during the Ancient Beasts period, he might not have been able to deal with Su Dong's attack. Even so, the four-element energy arrow finally injured Su Dong, but at the same time, Chi-Yu also experienced the power of the sun destruction magic. After condensing, the heat was actually above his Kirin True Fire, and the explosive power was much stronger. "Boss, surrender," Yan Xiaoi shouted to Chi-Yu while constantly urging energy to heal Su Dong's injuries. Looking at the huge injuries on Su Dong's body, he could not help but frown. He vaguely felt that Chi-Yu had gone too far. After all, Su Dong's injuries were very serious. Even with the help of his healing magic, it would take a long time for him to recover. That was a penetrating wound. Even 4 of his sternum were broken, and his lungs were seriously injured. In fact, Yan Xiaoi and Su Dong did not know that if Chi-Yu had urged the energy on the arrow when it entered his body, with the wind, fire, thunder, and water energies, not to mention his chest, even if it had only hit his arm, it would have been enough to completely tear Su Dong's body apart. If we don't fight until the last moment and lose all our ability to resist, how can we say the word surrender? The word surrender will never exist in the dictionary of us Zodiac Guardian breed warriors. I don't have that, and neither can you guys. Under the joint attack of the 4 Zodiac Guardian breed warriors, Kirin's mirror played a great role. At this moment, Chi-Yu was in a completely defensive state. Kirin transformed into a small shield and cooperated with Kirin's mirror to neutralize the attacks of the 4 Zodiac Guardian breed warriors. Ryue's voice came from the mouth of the white dragon in the sky. Chi-Yu is right. No one should give up until the last moment. The dragon swam in the sky, and the clouds moved along with it. The attack of the dragon god had finally begun. At the same time, Ryue's voice rang in the ears of the 4 Zodiac Guardian breed warriors who were besieging Chi-Yu. The 4 of them retreated at lightning speed and made way for Chi-Yu's position. The white dragon swooped down without any reservation. Ryue did not choose to attack with energy. The white dragon's 2 huge front claws directly clawed at Chi-Yu. She actually wanted to fight hand to hand. Chi-Yu's eyes lit up and he shouted, "Great!" The black light converged, and the silver patterns on his body lit up completely. His entire body doubled in size in an instant. Instead of retreating, he advanced and flew towards Ryue. A strange feeling suddenly rose in Ryue's heart because she suddenly lost the sense of Chi-Yu's energy. Chi-Yu, who was flying in the sky, looked like an ordinary person. There was no energy emitting from his body. The sudden change caught Ryue by surprise. After all, she was not facing an enemy, but the man she loved the most. The front claws of the dragon suddenly slowed down a little, but at this moment something strange happened. Chi-Yu's 2 big hands actually grabbed both of Ryue's front claws. At the moment of contact, dense energy exploded. He actually grabbed Ryue's transformed dragon god in midair and threw it away. Ryue was thrown 100 meters away before she could stabilize her body. She knew that Chi-Yu had already shown mercy. She couldn't help but be shocked. She knew very well how much energy she had after transforming. Although the dragon god consumed a lot of energy, it could also increase her strength by several times after transforming. especially the strength of her body. Don't look down on me. An evil smile appeared on Chi Yu's face. If it wasn't for Ryue's sudden withdrawal, he naturally wouldn't have stopped. To him, the biggest gain from becoming Emperor Huang's disciple was the use of energy. Ryue's dragon god was indeed powerful. After transforming, it had already surpassed Chi Yu, who had consumed a lot of energy. However, at that moment, Chi Yu was able to completely concentrate all his energy on his hands. All the energy represented the energy of every cell in his body. At that moment, his body was extremely weak, but at the same time, it made his hands extremely strong. Even in the face of the dragon god, he didn't retreat. The Zodiac guardian god warriors below looked at the scene in front of them with their mouths agape. They couldn't believe that Chi Yu could actually defeat Ryue, who had transformed into the dragon god with his bare hands. This could only be explained as inconceivable. Chi Yu's attacks did not stop. 15 minutes, only 15 minutes have passed. Following his nightmarish voice, Chi Yu's body had already arrived in front of Ming Ming. Ming Ming only felt her vision blurred. In the next moment, Chi Yu, whose body was twice as big as before, had already opened his arms to hug her. Similarly, she didn't feel any energy. However, with the previous scene where Ryue suffered a loss, Ming Ming naturally understood that this was not a simple attack. The main strength of a chicken was in its arms. Seeing that Chi Yu's arms were about to hug her, Ming Ming gritted her teeth and let out an ear-piercing shriek. While shocking Chi Yu's mind, she operated the Iron Wing skill to the extreme and blocked Chi Yu's arms. Everything happened very quickly. While Chi Yu's voice was still floating in the air, the attack on Ming Ming had already begun. The feeling of weightlessness suddenly came. The arms that should have hugged her suddenly disappeared. The feeling of using the wrong force almost made Ming Ming vomit blood. At this time, Chi Yu's palms had already pressed on her shoulders. Before she could even scream, Ming Ming's body had already been thrown away, blood spurting out wildly. After Su Dong, he also suffered a great injury. Ian shouted in surprise, "Damn, Chi Yu, you're serious." Chi Yu's cold voice sounded, "When did I lie?" In the next moment, his body had already left the place. Like a slippery fish, he passed through the gap between Guan Ping, Ian, and Hu Guang. In the air, Ryue had returned. The 3 Zodiac Guardian warriors on the ground also felt Chi Yu's determination. In the face of such a huge pressure, their strength had been raised to an unprecedented limit. A dazzling light flashed in Chi Yu's eyes. "Although with my current strength, if given time, I can still defeat you, I will inevitably be injured. It's time to end this." A dark red light shone on the ground without warning. The fog around Ryue's body disappeared, and all the Zodiac Guardian warriors were shrouded in endless darkness at this moment. A miserable shriek rang out, causing Ryu and the others to be shocked. That was because the miserable shriek came from Yen Xiaoi. "Little guy, your chrysanthemum ability is not bad. The delay effect actually had a great effect on me even when you were 3 levels lower than me. However, I still want to let you know what the gap in strength is." The surroundings suddenly lit up. The light was dark red in color. Ryue suddenly remembered the scene when she was intercepted by Chi Yu on the highway in her sports car. She hurriedly shouted, "Everyone be careful. This is an illusion. Gather together so that he won't break us one by one." "Ryue, don't you understand? It's useless. This is my special domain, called the Art of 1,000 Tricks and 100 Changes. In this domain, unless one of you can completely surpass me in strength, I am the master of this place. Sumeru is like a mustard seed. In here, any gap can become infinitely big or infinitely small." Chi Yu's body did not appear, but his voice came from all directions. It was impossible to determine his location. Chi Yu's strength had completely shaken the hearts of every Zodiac Guardian God warrior. Just when they thought that they had a chance at victory, such a situation had occurred. The situation had completely reversed in this empty space. They found that a feeling of fear had risen in their hearts. 3 figures floated over. Perhaps it was to let Ryue and the other 3 identify them. The figures floated very slowly. They were Su Dong, Ming Ming, and Yan Xiaoi. At this time, Yan Xiaoi's face was extremely pale. His hands were pressed on his lower abdomen, and a stream of blood flowed continuously from the corner of his mouth. Obviously, his lower abdomen had been hit by Qiyu. In today's battle, I want you to understand that only with absolute strength can you become the final winner. Never let the enemy know how strong you are, and never be satisfied with what you have achieved. As a Zodiac Guardian warrior, behind our responsibilities, we need the support of strong strength. Frankly speaking, in today's battle, everyone's strength is much better than I expected. However, this is far from enough. We are the Zodiac Guardian warriors, the strongest guardians of the East. Therefore, we need more strength to be able to protect everything that we need to protect. Qiyu suddenly appeared 30 meters away from Ryue and the other 3. Ryue, your divine dragon true body is indeed powerful. Even I have to go all out when facing it head-on. However, the divine dragon true body has its flaws. First of all, when you use it, it requires too much time. Although 10 seconds may not be a big deal to you, in a battle with a real powerhouse, 10 seconds can even determine life and death hundreds of times. Secondly, although the divine dragon true body is powerful, it consumes too much energy. How much energy does a huge dragon body need to be maintained? And how much energy can you use in your attacks? If you want to truly unleash its power, it is only possible in a group fight. Moreover, if I remember correctly, your divine dragon true body is only the foundation of the last few moves of the 18 dragon leaping strike. If you want to truly unleash its power, you need to continue to train hard. Su Dong's situation is similar to yours, except that his Great Sun Destroyer technique requires a longer time to condense energy. However, his condensed attack is indeed worthy of all of you to learn. As for the rest of you, using a single attack method and scattering energy in all directions is a great failure. If I used a guerrilla fighting method, it would not even take an hour. I can still defeat all of you. Ian retorted, I don't believe it. Although our energy consumption is great, you are fighting 1 against 7. Don't tell me that the consumption is not great? If the battle continues to the end, I'm afraid that you will be the first to fall. Qiyu smiled indifferently, is that really so? This is the difference in strength. Without using the 1,000 opportunities and 100 changes technique, my energy recovery speed is at least 3 times faster than yours. Don't ask me why. Very soon, you will understand. Alright, let me end today's battle. Be careful. Ryue's warning had just sounded, but she was surprised to find that Guan Ping, Hu Guang and Ian, who were originally beside her, had disappeared at the same time, and their figures had appeared 1,000 meters away, turning Mustard Seed into Mount Sumeru. Using the gap between the 4 of them to enlarge, Qiyu had already separated the 4 of them. As he continued to use the 1,000 opportunities and 100 changes technique, he was becoming more and more proficient. Invisible, Qiyu disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was opposite Guan Ping. Guan Ping's fist. Carrying a huge amount of energy, it only destroyed a shadow. Teleportation allowed Qiyu to attack like a fish in water. The violent shock on his back caused Guan Ping to cry out miserably, becoming the 4th heavily injured person in Qiyu's hands. And in the next moment, Qiyu's body appeared out of thin air next to Ian. No matter how fast Ian was, he could not be faster than teleportation. Moreover, when Qiyu appeared, he had already used the 1,000 opportunities and 100 changes technique to create 10 identical figures. After 2 attacks, Ian and Hu Guang followed in Guan Ping's footsteps and were seriously injured by Qiyu and vomited blood. The divine dragon true body consumed a lot of energy for Ryue, and when she wanted to help, she found that the distance between her and the other 3 was increasing. I said, in this domain, I am the absolute master. This is Kirin's most powerful weapon, so you have no chance here. Chi Yu's voice sounded next to Ryue, giving her a fright. I'm sorry, my dear wife, I can't be biased. Chi Yu's fist landed on Ryue's body, but a huge amount of energy condensed into a sharp needle and pierced into the white dragon's spine. The intense pain caused Ryue's body to tremble, and she had already revealed her true form. Blood spurted out of her mouth, and she used all her strength to dissolve the sharp needle-like energy at the cost of consuming more than half of her energy. The dark red light disappeared, and the bright moon reappeared in the sky. The surroundings were still surrounded by the fresh smell of grass and the cool summer night. However, everything had changed, and it was the people who had changed. Jida sat there dumbfounded, looking at the 7 people lying on the ground next to Chiyu. The dazzling battle from before had already dazzled him, but the final result was something he could never have imagined. From the beginning to the end, it had only taken a total of 20 minutes. However, the outcome was so tragic. Not only did Chiyu win, but the 7 Zodiac Guardian warriors, including Ryue and Ming, were all seriously injured. Although they were still conscious, it was obvious that they had lost the ability to move. Chiyu shook his head lightly and said, "It's a pity that Modi and Vol aren't here. I'll make up for it in the future." Jida stood up angrily. Although he was deeply afraid of Chiyu's strength, he could not control the impulse in his heart when he saw his sister lying on the ground, still vomiting blood. "Chiyu, are you King crazy? These are your companions, your friends. How could you be so heavy-handed?" Looking at Jida's slightly twisted face, Chiyu smiled and said, "Brother-in-law, or should I say, my good disciple. You'll understand in a while. Oh, by the way, there's something I have to warn you in advance. Don't tell anyone about what you've seen and heard today, not even General G. The era of the ancient beasts is indeed magical, but in order not to destroy the balance of the entire world, I hope that this secret will only be spread among our inner circle. You're my disciple, and also Ming's brother, so I'm not afraid of you. However, if this news were to spread, no matter who you are, I won't let you off." Chiyu's smiling expression became very serious towards the end. This caused the fear in Jida's heart to increase a little. "All right, I won't spread this news. But you have to hurry and save Ming and the rest. Can't you see that they're all seriously injured? Chiyu, you've changed. When did you become so ruthless?" Chiyu shook his head lightly and said, "No, you're wrong. I haven't changed and will never change. I'm still the same Chiyu. However, you have to understand, whether they're bleeding or heavily injured today, they're all injured by my hand. What if it's an enemy today? What if it's an enemy that's stronger than me? Would it still be a serious injury? I just hope that everyone understands that only powerful strength can guarantee everything. There's no limit to increasing one's strength, and everything is possible. Of course, I have other motives in beating them up. If it wasn't for this, I wouldn't have used the domain. Look, why hasn't Master Zagru said anything?" Zagru, who had been watching everything from the side, smiled and said, "Because Kirin has truly grown. I believe that you'll be able to control all of this." Looking at each other, Chiyu saw trust in Zagru's eyes, and his heart warmed slightly. A faint light was emitted from his body, the power of time wind. Under the wind's support, the 7 people on the ground were lifted up. Chiyu's use of energy was indeed at the pinnacle, and under the effect of the wind, the 7 Zodiac Guardian warriors sat cross-legged. Chiyu took a deep breath. The battle just now had consumed a lot of his energy, and because of the continuous attacks from the 7 people, he didn't have much time to recover his energy. In order to leave a deep impression on everyone, he didn't even choose the most energy-saving fighting method. The green wind disappeared, and Chiyu sat cross-legged in the middle of everyone. The 7 Zodiac Guardian warriors' gazes were focused on him. At this time, these Zodiac Guardian warriors were very weak, and each of them had suffered different degrees of injuries. Among them, Su Dong suffered the most serious injury. Chapter 171. Then, a blue light appeared. That was the light of the water thundercloud force. In the previous battles, the water thundercloud force that Chi-Yu used the most was the water thundercloud force. This time it was in full effect. Mixed with the natural energy and Kirin's special marrow and muscle washing art, the energy began to seep into the pores of the 7 people. Under the effect of the gentle energy, the Zodiac warriors subconsciously closed their eyes and felt the changes in the energy. Don't resist. Circulate the energy according to your usual cultivation method and drive the energy into your body. Chi-Yu's voice sounded in the hearts of the Zodiac warriors. The effect of Kirin's marrow and muscle washing art had begun. Using his own energy to heal and transform the bodies of the 7 people at the same time was something he had planned for a long time. Although the Zodiac warriors' cultivation method was based on the ascending cloud art. After all, each of the Zodiac warriors had their own special abilities. If it was a one-on-one transformation, Chi-Yu could naturally do it easily. However, if it was a one-on-one transformation, due to the different energy and resistance of each person, it would be impossible to succeed. Today, he had seriously injured them, which naturally reduced their ability to resist. At the same time, it would make the Zodiac warriors realize that they were not strong enough. That was why Chi-Yu chose to do this. The natural energy continued to condense into Chi-Yu's body from the plants planted in the Dragonfield courtyard and the plants outside. The water thundercloud force was also constantly strengthened by the energy molecules in the air. As soon as the healing and transformation process began, Chi-Yu realized that the natural energy in Baiji's era was many times weaker than that in the era of the ancient beast. He also secretly rejoiced in his heart. Fortunately, he became the source of nature during the era of the ancient beast. Otherwise, the natural energy in his body would not have become so strong. Jida looked at the people enveloped by the energy and couldn't help but show a trace of envy in his eyes. Although he didn't really understand Chi-Yu's purpose. But from Chi-Yu's actions, he could see that he obviously had a special reason for doing this. He stood up, walked to the gate of the Dragonfield courtyard, and sat down. Together with Grandmaster Zagru, they stood guard outside and inside the courtyard. Chi-Yu didn't dare to enter a meditative state, because he needed to have precise control over the energy. Only then would he be able to perfect the transformation of each of the Zodiac warriors. As a result, his rate of recovery was far slower than his rate of consumption. The thundercloud force in his body was depleting rapidly. Chi-Yu knew that he had made a mistake in his judgment. The Zodiac Guardian warriors were stronger than he had expected. When he was halfway through the transformation, his own energy had already begun to decline. He could not help but feel anxious. After all, this kind of modification would only have the best effect the first time. If he gave up halfway, even if he tried again in the future, he would not be as good as before. An idea struck Chi-Yu, and he called out in his mind. Zagru had been attentively watching Chi-Yu's group of 8. Suddenly, he felt a huge wave of energy coming from the sky. He subconsciously stood up, and a milky white Buddha's light penetrated his body. At this moment, he saw a red cloud falling in Chi-Yu's direction. His tense nerves relaxed. With his Buddha's eyes, he could clearly see that the person who had suddenly arrived was Wen-Ting. Under the call of Chi-Yu's spiritual power, Wen-Ting arrived in time, and the red light fused with Chi-Yu. With the support of Wen-Ting's huge energy, Chi-Yu was immediately refreshed. Because he and Wen-Ting could use the fusion ability during the energy transformation process, he and Wen-Ting could absorb the energy molecules in the air together. In this way, not only would the consumption be reduced, but with the support of Wen-Ting in her perfect state, he would even gradually recover his thundercloud force. Time passed very quickly during cultivation. When the sun shone on the earth and the cicadas' cries became clearer, the light on the lawn of the Dragonfield courtyard finally disappeared. The first to open her eyes was Ryue. She could not help but let out a soft cry and looked at her body in surprise. Her skin had become more sparkling and translucent than before, and her whole body was full of vitality. What made her even more surprised was that the meridians in her body, which were originally filled with energy, had become more than 3 times wider. Moreover, the tenacity of her meridians was unknown as to how much stronger they were compared to before. The meridians that were originally injured by Chi Yu had already recovered, and her whole body was full of energy. Although the dragon thundercloud force in her body had not recovered much, the changes in her body had already made her full of excitement. It should be known that after reaching her level, she had to constantly maintain her meridians in the process of cultivation, which made her cultivation gradually slow down. Even a small change in the body would greatly improve her strength, let alone in this situation. Ryue's gaze was looking for Chi Yu's figure. At this time, Chi Yu looked very calm. He was sitting there with his upper body naked, and his bronze skin reflected a faint luster under the sunlight. The other Zodiac Guardian warriors also woke up one after another. What Ryue felt, they naturally felt too. An excited expression appeared on everyone's face. They finally understood why Chi Yu was so serious about the battle yesterday. Ah! Oh my God! I have broken through. An expression of ecstasy appeared on Su Dong's face. In just one night, the penetrating wound on his chest had completely recovered with the treatment of Yen Xiaoi and the effect of Kirin's marrow washing and muscle tendon changing skill later. What made him even more excited was that he had broken through the bottleneck that he had been in for many days, becoming the 3rd Zodiac Guardian God to break through to the 6 cloud level after Ryue and Chi Yu. It should be known that the 6 cloud level and the 5 cloud level were completely different concepts. After reaching the 6 cloud level, not only could he carry out the 2nd stage of origin mutation, but he could also cultivate a more powerful origin ability at the same time. When Ting had already gone back to rest, she knew that Chi Yu had a lot of things to deal with. When she released the fusion, she unreservedly left her energy to Chi Yu, and went back to her room to cultivate. With One Ting's support and the subsequent recovery, Chi Yu's thundercloud force had recovered to about 70% of its peak state. Everyone can feel it, right? Chi Yu smiled and was the last one to open his eyes. The glaring sunlight had no effect on powerhouses like them. Yen Xiaoi stood up and stretched his body. He chuckled and said, "Boss, hit me. Quickly, the harder the better. If I can get such a good reward every time I get beaten up, I'd rather be your closest sandbag." Chi Yu floated up and kicked him away. Annoyed, he sent him flying with a kick. "In your dreams. Do you want to reap without sowing? It seems that I have to give you special training. What I said last night was for nothing." Su Dong laughed out loud. "Father-in-law, can I be your son-in-law now? I'm already at the 6 cloud level. In terms of strength, none of them are my match." Chi Yu rolled his eyes. "Did you last for an hour? Can't you make an exception for this?" Chi Yu snorted and said, "My time is tight. I don't have time to talk to everyone. I've already modified your meridians. The natural energy modification won't have any side effect. For a period of time from now on, you must seize the time to train and stabilize your expanded meridians. You should have noticed that in the battle last night, my meridians are much longer than yours. In the continuous battle, I can still defeat you? This is the effect of the modified meridians. At the same time, it's also the difference in the form of energy. You want to have a longer-lasting battle strength. In addition to avoiding the consumption of energy during the battle, you must also try to compress the thundercloud force in your body during the training process. Only by compressing the energy will you be able to unleash greater power when attacking, and only then will you be able to last longer in battle. If it was just a simple lecture, it would take a certain amount of time to understand. But after the battle last night, these Zodiac Guardian God warriors deeply understood Chi Yu's meaning. After Chi Yu taught them some of the actual combat experience that Huang Emperor taught him, He immediately called out Vol and Modi. Through the face-to-face combat, he taught them another lesson. Of course, Modi and Vol's injuries were not much better than the other Zodiac guardian god warriors. But Vol's injury was a bit more serious. "Vol, why are you so stupid?" Modi hugged Vol, who was covered in blood, and tears kept flowing from his pretty face. Originally, Vol was seriously injured by Chi-Yu's attack, so Chi-Yu turned his attack to Modi. Just when Modi couldn't resist, and was about to be injured by Chi-Yu, the seriously injured Vol suddenly rushed out and blocked Chi-Yu's powerful attack for Modi. Injury on injury. At this time, he was completely unconscious. As the initiator, Chi-Yu stood there and sighed in his heart. "Vol, good brother. Boss can only help you so much. Whether you can succeed in the future depends on your own ability." With his strength, although Vol rushed to block, he could still dodge and attack Modi. But in order to help Vol save the damsel in distress, Chi-Yu didn't dodge Vol, which led to the scene in front of him. Of course, Vol's injury was far from as serious as it seemed. For his good brother, how could Chi-Yu not know when to stop? The other Zodiac guardian god warriors looked at Vol with some pity. Just now, when Vol had pounced forward, his incomparably firm expression had filled their hearts with shock. They all understood that if he really faced an enemy, he would do the same. "Chi-Yu, is there something wrong with you?" Tears welled up in Modi's eyes as he stared viciously at Chi-Yu. Chi-Yu smiled indifferently and said, "This is the result of not being as good as others. Why, you let Vol block my attack for you, don't you feel lucky?" Modi slowly stood up, and every Zodiac guardian god warrior clearly saw her delicate body slightly trembling. Although the hero saving the damsel in distress was tacky, Vol's completely disregard of life and death to save the damsel in distress was not a show. Only Modi, who had really experienced it, could fully feel the aura that Vol exuded at that moment. The white light became brighter and brighter, and Modi's legs suddenly disappeared. In the air, a fan-shaped light and shadow, with countless attacks, rushed towards Chi-Yu's body. Of course, everyone knew the ending, but no one would stop it, because everyone knew that Chi-Yu was doing it for their own good. Modi's attack broke out like never before. Perhaps because of Vol, at this time she actually exerted 120% of her combat power. Surprisingly, Chi-Yu did not attack Modi, nor did she fight back. She just activated Kiran's mirror and formed a layer of barrier around her body, allowing Modi to attack violently, and with the help of Kiran's mirror, she blocked all of her spring-like legs. When a woman goes berserk, she is absolutely terrifying. Dense roars like drums constantly came from around Chi-Yu's body. Although everyone knew that it was impossible for Modi to hurt Chi-Yu, looking at her crazy attack, everyone couldn't help but be secretly shocked. There was naturally a reason why Chi-Yu did not fight back. First, he wanted to release the resentment in Modi's heart, only then would it be good for her body. Secondly, as she continued to attack, her gratitude towards Vol would continue to be magnified. Explosive attacks consumed a lot of energy, and when she was exhausted, it was almost the same as being heavily injured. Although he had a plan, Modi's determination still surprised Chi-Yu. Her attacks did not show any signs of slowing down, even if her thundercloud force was about to be exhausted. Her attacks actually became fiercer and fiercer. Chi-Yu understood that Modi was about to overdraft herself to attack. This situation was naturally not what he wanted to see. Enough! Kiran's mirror waved, and the thundercloud force exploded, causing Modi to fly 10 meters away. Modi, who had just entered the 5-cloud level, was after all not on the same level as Chi-Yu, especially when her mind was already restricted by grief. There was no order to speak of at all. Seeing that Modi was about to attack again, Chi-Yu hurriedly said, "If you continue to attack, Vol will not be able to be saved." Modi was stunned for a moment, her red eyes showed a slight trace of confusion, but her anger clearly had not disappeared. "You still care about his life and death? If that's the case, why did you attack so heavily?" Chi-Yu helplessly shook his head and said, "When a woman goes crazy, she is indeed scarier than a man. My attack calculation is very accurate, but I didn't expect Vol to care so much about you. From now on, treat him better, and that will be your repayment. Sit down, I will let you understand why you are doing this." 2 people were obviously much easier to modify than 7 people. When the sun moved to the middle of the day, Chi-Yu's modification of Modi and Vol was completed. Field Mouse was the same as Yen Xiaoi. They were both at the 3 clouds level. The lower one's strength was, the greater the benefits from the transformation. Moreover, Field Mouse's injuries were more serious than the others. This allowed his meridians to receive more natural energy during the modification process. Tiredly standing up, Chi-Yu already felt that his eyes were a little blurry. After all, even if he was an Iron Man, his body would not be able to withstand such continuous consumption. This was even with Wen Ting's help, otherwise, he might not even be able to last night. Ryue and Ming Ming each held one of Chi-Yu's arms. Chi-Yu shook his head and said, "I'm fine." "Hey, why are you all still here? Don't you understand that time is running out? All of you, go back to your rooms and cultivate." His words sounded a little rude, but at this time, all the Zodiac Guardian warriors felt a kind of sincere feeling in their hearts. Chi-Yu not only conquered them with strength, but also unreserved dedication. That energy transformation consumed a huge amount of energy. However, he persevered and changed everyone once. In the hearts of all the Zodiac Guardian warriors, at this time, Chi-Yu had become the real king among them, the unquestionable king. Everyone went back to their rooms with a happy mood. Chi-Yu comfortably put his arms on Ming Ming and Ryue's shoulders. At this time, his expression relaxed. The first thing after returning was finally completed. After the modification of natural energy, everyone's physical ability had been greatly improved. What they felt was only a part of the benefit. As they continued to cultivate in the future, their feelings would become more and more profound. Modi woke up a little earlier than Vol, and felt the changes in her body. Her eyes were a little dull, and she looked up at Chi-Yu, who was smiling faintly, and her pretty face couldn't help but blush. "Last night we were the same. Not to mention Vol, even me and Ming Ming, that bad guy, were not spared." Ryue smiled and went forward to pull Modi up. Modi looked at Vol on the ground, lowered her head and asked, Is he okay?" A trace of slyness flashed in Chi-Yu's eyes. He sighed and said, "Originally, according to my plan, he should be fine. But who knew that this good brother of mine was so stupid? His injury is too serious." "What? Could it be that Vol's injury can't be healed?" Modi was shocked. Looking at Chi-Yu, her eyes turned red again. Chi-Yu secretly thought that there was a way. Modi's character was gentle and persevering. It was impossible to persuade her. Only real action could gradually move her heart. "No. How can I let my good brother not recover?" "Don't worry." Modi heaved a sigh of relief. "Thank you. I misunderstood you. I'm sorry." Chi-Yu shook her head. "There's no need to apologize, but Sister Maudie, I still need your help." Modi was stunned. "Help? Say it. We're all on the same side, it's what I should do." Chi-Yu combed the hair that blocked his view to the back of his head, smiled and said, "It's not that I need your help, but Vol. You also saw it. His previous injury was very serious and he lost a lot of blood. So, although the injury has been cured by me, his vitality has been damaged. He must be carefully looked after to recover. So, I want you to help me take care of him for a few days." Modi didn't even hesitate and agreed. "This is what I should do. Vol was injured because of me. I'm his teacher and friend. Naturally, I should take care of him." Chi-Yu knew that matters of the heart couldn't be rushed. He nodded and said, "I've carefully examined his body. It will take about 7 days to recover. Among the Zodiac warriors, your energy is the most gentle. It's very suitable to help him recover. In these 7 days, you not only need to take care of his daily life. At the same time, when you practice, you need to input your own thundercloud force into his body, and then introduce his thundercloud force. Through the combination of thundercloud force, you can better help him consolidate his vitality. Modi hesitated for a moment and said, "But each of us has a different cultivation method. Will there be a problem?" Chiyu said, "Don't worry. Of course we can't, but our Zodiac Guardian God Warriors practice the ascending cloud art as the foundation. In terms of origin, it's the same. This time, after I used natural energy to transform it, everyone's energy has a common characteristic. Although practicing at the same time won't increase the effect of practice, it's a good choice to help Vol recover his vitality. Do as I say, and I promise to return you a healthy Vol." Modi finally showed a trace of a smile on his face, nodded and said, "I will take good care of him." "Modi, be careful." Vol, who was still sitting cross-legged, suddenly exclaimed and jumped up from the ground. His thundercloud force was far from recovering, so he suddenly lost his balance and fell to the side. Modi was the closest to Vol, so he quickly held his chubby body and helped him stabilize. "Be careful, I'm here." Vol slowly recovered, his eyes gradually focused. When he saw that Modi was next to him, he suddenly said in surprise, "Modi, are you okay? That's great." Usually, he called Modi teacher, but now he suddenly omitted the word teacher, but it didn't attract Modi's attention. Chiyu secretly laughed in his heart. Who said that Vol brothers don't know how to chase girls? As long as Modi isn't a stone girl, it's impossible for her not to be touched. Feeling Vol's true feelings, Modi's eyes flashed with a light of struggle, but she quickly recovered. "Vol, why are you so stupid?" Fortunately, Chiyu withdrew part of the attack in time, otherwise. Vol smiled, scratched his head and said, "I didn't think that much. I just felt that boss's attack was a bit fierce. I was afraid that you would be hurt more, so... Hey, why does my body seem to be much lighter? My meridians have also become wider, what's going on?" Chiyu smiled and said, "Silly boy, I helped you change your meridians. Otherwise, why do you think I attacked you?" Vol laughed and said, "I knew boss wouldn't really want to hurt us. It's so cool, it seems that I'm not far from the four clouds." He didn't notice that because Modi had just supported him, he, who was a head shorter than Modi, still had his hands around Modi's waist. At this time, the doorbell of the courtyard suddenly rang. Jida had been guarding at the door, and when everyone woke up, they went back to the villa to sleep. Chiyu said with some doubt, "It's noon, who would come?" "Ming Ming, you go and see." Ming Ming agreed, went to the door and opened it. The Dragon Field courtyard was full of Zodiac Guardian warriors. She naturally wouldn't be afraid of some blind guy robbing her. The door opened. Today, Chiyu was surprised to see a woman, no, it should be a girl, walking in from outside. Furthermore, she was a very peculiar girl, one that couldn't be any more peculiar. Seeing this girl, Vol couldn't help but change his expression. I'll go back to my room first." At this time, his short and thick legs displayed a very strong running ability, and in just a few exertions, he ran back to the villa. "Vol, wait for me." Modi remembered Chiyu's warning and hurriedly chased after him. At this time, Chiyu didn't even notice Vol's voice. His attention was completely focused on the girl who suddenly appeared because she was really too strange. She was about the same height as a Vol, but her body was twice as thick as a Vol's. Standing there, she was definitely a standard globe. Her hair was short, if not for the pair of plump breasts in front of her. With a face full of fat, it was hard to recognize her as a female. Her thick limbs looked very inflexible, especially when she walked. That appearance, it was as strange as it could be. On her face was a pair of glasses, a pair of small eyes. Because of the fat, it was impossible to see clearly, as if there were only two meat slits. Chiyu stared dumbfoundedly at the Earth globe moving towards him. An ear-piercing roar came from the Earth globe's mouth. "Bo Guang, don't run! Wait for me!" Only then did Chi-Yu understand why Vol wanted to run. The female sphere in front of him was really a bit scary. As the so-called ugly is not your fault, but it is your fault to come out and scare people. As the boss of Vol, he took a step forward and blocked the way of the fat girl. "Hello, may I ask who are you?" Chi-Yu said very politely. The fat girl's huge body almost hit him, but fortunately she stopped at the last moment. She gasped and stared at Chi-Yu. "Who the hell are you? Why haven't I seen you before?" Not only was this girl fat, but she was also very dark. The skin on her face looked really scary. Even Chi-Yu could not tell her age. Hearing her question, Chi-Yu could not help but be stunned. "Little fatso, this is a private place. I think I have the right to ask you to leave at any time." The fat girl did not care about what Chi-Yu said. She raised her right fist and gestured at him. "What, not convinced? Do you believe that I won't beat you up?" This time, not only Chi-Yu laughed, even Ming Ming and Ryue, who were next to him, laughed. Ryue smiled. "All right, Dan, stop fooling around. Why are you looking for Vol?" Hearing Ryue's question, the arrogance on the fat girl's face disappeared. She pinched the corner of her clothes with both hands and said shyly, "I haven't seen him for a few days, I kind of miss him. Also, Sister Ryue, didn't you say that I can move here at any time? Bo Guang moved here from his home, so I have to move here too, is that okay?" Ryue resisted the urge to burst out laughing. "Yes, of course you can. You're one of us." Chi-Yu said in a daze, "I say, girl, don't tell me you like Vol? He is still very young. You can't destroy the flower of the motherland." "Bullshit. What young? You are the one who is young. I am in the same class as Bo Guang. Do you think I don't know how old he is? Do I need you to tell me? This old lady here is 1 year younger than him." The moment the plump lady faced Chi-Yu, she immediately became aggressive. Chi-Yu looked at her, dumbfounded, and said, "What? You are younger than him? That means you are only 15 years old? Oh my God! To be able to eat like this at 15 years old, that was too strong. Even if this fat girl did not weigh 300 pounds, she was probably at least 250 pounds. Powerful, truly too powerful. Ryue, aren't you going to introduce me? Why haven't I seen her before?" Ryue smiled as she came to Chi-Yu's side and said, "Let me introduce you. This girl is Modi's cousin, and also Xiao Yi's cousin. Speaking of which, she is also from the same branch. She is in the same class as Vol. Her surname is Mo, and her name is Mo Dan." "Ah? What's her name? Touch the balls? F***ck, that's too strong. I'll kick you to death." Mo Dan suddenly raised her short but powerful leg and kicked Chi-Yu's waist. With Chi-Yu's agility, he naturally would not be hit. His body moved slightly to the side, and he easily dodged her attack, but he could not help but be surprised. She has an energy aura on her. Could it be? Ryue smiled and said, "That's right, you guessed it. Modi's family is really strong. One family with 3 zodiac signs. I didn't have time to say, but Whitey is the cow zodiac sign. Master Zagru found it when she was looking for Vol. He had already helped her wake up. Now she is a 1-cloud level practitioner." "Oh my God! The cow zodiac sign is like this." Chi-Yu could not help but glance at Mo Dan's huge chest. He thought to himself, "Isn't this a cow?" Mo Dan raised her head and looked at Chi-Yu and said, "How is it? Are you scared?" She was wearing a green village shirt, and she used her 2 fat hands to tug at the super large village shirt, and said proudly, "I call myself the indifferent green shirt." Chi-Yu laughed and said, "So you are the cow zodiac sign. What's with this indifferent green shirt?" Mo Dan said proudly, "Because I like to wear green shirts, and with my name on it, it's done. Isn't it cool?" Chi-Yu nodded seriously and said, "It's really cool, but when used on a cow, no matter how cool it is, it seems, go to hell." Mo Dan was obviously angered by Chi-Yu, and her fat hands reached for his collar. Unfortunately, she was a little short and could not reach.